We didn't fight a 20-year war. We fought a 1-year war 20 different times. I know why we went to Afghanistan. Got it. We were punched in the mouth with 9/11. Let's go fucking crush these guys. I was on the side of going in at the time. I was young. Now I feel like that was, short-sighted and obviously the wrong call. I wouldn't change anything that I did. I have zero regrets, but I do think that from a leadership standpoint, I don't know if we have our shit together. We should know why we're doing this and if it's worth the cost of losing our buddies.
If Trump waved a fucking wand tomorrow and said, hey, I want you to fix the military from a leadership standpoint, do you even know how you would go about it?
I have 4 dogs, and they've eaten all types of different food, and we recently found Team Dog, I believe this spring, so we've been on it for a year. Seeger was on it first, and Tiller was on it, and then we put the Goldens on it, and I mean, all the dogs eat less food, the dogs' coats are way better. Everything about Team Dog is, I'm very impressed. My dog trainer, Justin Allen, he uses it on all 60 dogs that are there for training. He's tried every single food in the game too, and they just stay super healthy on this Team Dog.
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He is a former Navy SEAL, big surprise. He's also a 2-time Olympic medalist in 04 Athens and 08 Beijing. He's still the American record holder for the 400-meter freestyle, and at one point simultaneously held American records for the 400, 800, and 1500 freestyle, which, as a lot of you know, I grew up swimming, certainly nowhere to even a tenth of that level, but I'm looking forward to asking him questions about it. He's the founder and managing partner of Harpoon Ventures, $300 million plus venture capitalist firm. We won't hold that against him. Specializing in early stage tech companies. Ladies and gentlemen, the man with 2 last names. Welcome to the show.
It's not the first time I've heard that, Mike. No, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, man.
It is the first time you've heard
It's not. It's not. No.
Shit, I hope not.
No.
I assume that's a Danish name?
It is.
Yeah. I'm half Danish.
Really?
So, yeah.
No wonder we get along.
Yeah.
We're part Viking.
We're fucking cousins.
Yeah,
for Christ's
exactly.
sake. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, I've only been back to Denmark once to the homeland, so to speak.
Yeah.
Loved it, but used to be a powerful nation around the world, and these days not as much as it used to be.
I know it. I imagine you're probably twice as tall as most Vikings were, though. I saw just the studies of burial sites and whatever. Is it like most of them were actually not that tall?
Really?
They're like 5'5", 5'6".
I didn't know that.
But some of them were,
You like the show Vikings?
Oh fuck yeah.
Yeah. With Ragnar Lothbrok.
Yeah.
I love that.
How do you not love that?
How do you not love that? I've been thinking about getting that hairstyle.
I think you should.
You think it would help me with my investors and getting some startup founders? I think it'd be good.
Yeah, splatter some blood on your face, walk into a boardroom meeting.
I like to say with a lot of the things people say, I'm a walking stereotype, probably. If you had to stereotype what a former Olympian turned Navy SEAL turned venture capitalist is, it's probably me.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with that.
Yeah. I think there are far worse things to be former anything.
I think so.
Yeah. Before we get into the lightning round, I do have to ask, have you seen Michael Phelps in the shower room?
I have.
You have?
Yeah.
Anything you want to talk about that? Or
Nothing impressive.
have you told him that? You look him up
I guess you'll find out now.
I was expecting more than that. In that same realm, I am curious. So being at that level of competitive athletics in swimming, obviously you're one of the best swimmers in the world, or you were at that point, and I'm sure you still could blow most people out of the water. But SEAL training is typically revered as incredibly difficult aquatic training. Was there any part of SEAL training water related that you found at all challenging?
Not honestly.
Yeah.
And I gotten this question before also, just from some friends and colleagues, and I actually had it at the end of Hell Week. But a lot of people assume, because I was a swimmer, that going through BUD/S and the fact that we're a maritime-based, special operations organization, that BUD/S was a cakewalk or something like that for me. It was absolutely not. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever done. The aquatic part wasn't, but I went from training for the better part of a decade, twice a day. You're a former swimmer. You probably have some people in the audience who are swimmers. It's a grueling sport. Twice a day in the pool, a couple hours every session. So it's essentially like a 0G environment. And BUD/S is what? I mean, how many Gs do you think you're putting on with all the shit we're carrying and boats on heads and logs and all that? So that crushed me. The swimming, fortunately, didn't. I think the best thing that swimming did for me going into BUD/S was not just aquatic competency, it was having some hard-ass coaches. Yeah. I had some old school dudes who were my coaches who really, came to their coaching prowess in the 70s and 80s. And so it was sort of like, I don't know, the Rocky movies. Like, these guys were hard. You're putting it in. This is like Rocky IV. You're training in the snow, in a water context here, to get ready to swim the mile at the Olympic Games. So that hardcore nature in swimming, I think, and having that type of coach was pretty translatable going to BUD/S and with the instructor cadre, probably like when you were an instructor. I mean, there's a standard that the community wants to uphold, rightfully so. And they care and love the community so deeply that their hardness on the kids and on the people going through is not out of place of spite or wanting people to do poorly. It's out of pure love for the community and pure love for their brothers. I think it's very similar, actually, to the coaches that I had. Guys like Mark Schubert, coaches like Bill Rose, coaches like Dave Salo. They were hard on me. Yeah. But I think that was because they cared so much. Yeah. It's probably the same thing in anything in life. The people that are the hardest on you care the most about you, and it's easy to lose sight of that oftentimes day in and day out when you're going through the shit. But if you zoom out, those are the people in life I'm the most thankful for. Yeah,
that's amazing. I mean, it's I'm always fascinated by that transfer of mental toughness from a sport like swimming, and I don't think there's really that I can think of anything else like it. I mean, even track, cross country, et cetera. Like you still feel the other competitors. They're kind of right there. You can talk shit a little bit.
Totally.
You can hear them. And so with swimming, there's this weird, almost meditation-like state
100%
in the water that like nobody else can push you. I mean, when you're in the water, I mean, your coach can yell at you in between sets and whatever else, but like it forces you and separates any person that has even a slight question about themselves in terms of being able to push themselves hard. It just weeds you right the fuck out.
It does. It's. I think I'm biased because I'm a former swimmer and a distance guy, so I'm biased with this, and I don't have as much experience with other sports. But I think it's unique in the ways that you mentioned. You're alone with your thoughts, and you're alone with the pain. Like that could be that's to me the hardest thing ever. Yeah. You don't have any external stimulation. Certainly on breaks between sets, you can maybe talk a little shit to your buddy who you're swimming against, or the coach can sort of give you some grief and tell you some things to work on. But for the preponderance of a practice, you're staring at the black line at the bottom of the pool nonstop for hours, and so that gets pretty lonely. Yeah, it gets pretty difficult, especially as you're on rep whatever of dozens or hundreds of reps in many cases, and you're alone with that pain. Yeah. And also the oxygen deprivation, I'm sure, has something to do with it. Yeah. Some of the most like vivid daydreams, I guess maybe is or like daytime meditative experiences perhaps that I've ever had are in the pool following that black line, just because you're sort of like hypnotizing yourself. You're out of breath. You're holding your breath off of every single wall. I still look back on some of the practices and just think of like the random childhood memories that just snap back into my mind out of nowhere. Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to blur fact from fiction in some of those things as they come back. And so I think it's a pretty grueling sport, unlike track and field or cycling or other things that are endurance sports as well. You can sort of talk to somebody. Even now, I work out pretty much every morning with a former EOD senior chief who retired. He was my neighbor across the alley in Coronado. And half the time when we're running, we're talking. We're catching up on the day, sort of like a therapy session and all this stuff on work and what's going on in the world and all that. It's very enjoyable. Yeah. We do swim, every couple weeks, but we obviously can't talk to each other. We just sort of like do our own thing.
Yeah. I imagine, or I guess I'm curious, I mean, could you jump in a pool right now and break 5 minutes in a 500
No
free?
fucking way.
No way?
No fucking way.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed to say that because I'm embarrassed to say that. I remember the first time I broke 5 minutes in the 500. I think I was 12 or 13.
Jesus.
And but nowadays, no, absolutely not. And I'm swimming the 4th of July swim in Coronado. I did it a couple years ago. It's a 3K, and so I'm a little nervous about that. I'm like, shit, man, 3K? That's swimming. That's a long ways. Running that's far enough. But I'll get through it. But like, obviously, getting through it's different than like sort of like the competitive DNA that we have. Like, I don't want to just get through it. I want to like fucking win that thing. But I'm not training to win it, so it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, the expectation for you doing anything in the water, being a fucking Olympic medalist,
Totally.
is as high as
It's pretty high. And it's like, I don't know if the pressure. It's all self-imposed at the end of the day. I mean, we're our own worst enemy in life. I'm my own worst enemy, my own demons, my own thoughts, my own expectations of what I think good enough is.
Yeah.
And I think I've been fortunate to, have been at that level, at least in swimming, where the expectation's pretty high.
Yeah.
And so anything below that is considered a failure in my mind. And that's not logical. That's not realistic. But, especially as we get older. But yeah, I go into these things, and it's like any other team guy. Like, you have a team guy, never played soccer, never played ultimate frisbee, whatever, but you get out there and their expectation for themselves and probably of everybody around is they're going to fucking win.
Yeah.
And the reality is like they're not. They haven't trained for that. Yeah. Like it's not even, it's like a perishable skill, and it's a skill you have to develop in the first place in any sport, in any discipline. Yeah. So I think there's this expectation with team guys in general that anything they do, they're going to be like in the movies, like winning the whole thing, like a Mission Impossible or whatever. Yeah. And it's funny to see how uncoordinated we are in many ways. Yeah. And me as a former swimmer to boot, like it's a little bit, it's humbling to say the least.
No, for sure. Fighting is very much the same.
Yeah,
way, like
I've never gotten into it, but I know that you have, and I know you had Jocko on and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten into it pretty heavy the last 7 or 8 years, but on active duty, I know it's different now. I know the combatives program is quite a bit more robust.
A buddy of mine was the chief over there for a while, and like got to travel around everywhere, and he's taking it really seriously. He's really good.
Oh, it's awesome. The other question I wanted to start out with is. Spending so much time in a swimming pool, though, looking at a black line and guiding off of that was by far my biggest struggle at Buds was guiding and swimming in open water, and it took me a while to figure out how to
totally
do that.
Different.
No matter how fast you swim, if you're swimming twice as far because your guiding sucks. I mean, was that was that at all a challenge for you?
It was, but I was lucky that I did a couple open water races in my competitive swimming days. So I was lucky to have a little bit of experience with it. And also in Bud, you're doing combat side stroke. I wish we did freestyle. I would have broke all these records.
Yeah.
I got so much shit in this stuff. We got so much to talk about. It's fun. It was, I think I was an okay guider. My second Olympics is when they added the 10K open water swim to the Olympic Games. 10K open water, that shit's far as fuck, man. That's crazy. Yeah. And so I thought I was going to do that. I did one 10K. And at the time, this is when we wore the bodysuits, which are not quite wetsuits, are not for that intended purpose, but you get hot. So I did one down in, I think at Fort Lauderdale, something like that, down in Florida. I got my ass kicked. I went out fast. Yeah. I was like in the lead at the 5K and then just totally died. And got my ass kicked and was overheated. And I'm like, dude, I'm just not doing this again. Yeah. This isn't my discipline. I'll stick with the pool races. Yeah. We're temperature controlled, prima donna stuff.
Nothing trying
but
to
like
eat
the open water guys and my teammate at SC, who's from Tunisia, he ended up winning the 10K at a couple of different Olympics. And he actually won the 1500, won the gold medal. So really proud of him and what he did, and to be able to compete against him was really, really cool. Yeah. Lots of things to dive in there.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, we'll definitely get into it. Just a quick lightning round that I like to ask everybody. What's the last book you read?
I'm reading one right now on Andrew Jackson. I just started it. Last one I read was on Thomas Jefferson. I think I picked the wrong one. I was looking forward to more of his like professional life, and I sort of burned out at the point where I just talked a lot about his background and what have you. I also read recently David McCullough's 1776, which I loved. That was amazing. I mean, I think that was the one, the most recent one I read a couple weeks ago, cover to cover. Remarkable to see that time in history at our country's formation, and I think even more remarkable to learn about George Washington's failings as a general and as a leader. It's not something we talk about, but I think it's something that's useful for any person who aspires to do something special. How reluctant he was to take command, how the Continental Congress put that on him and said, you're in charge, and his lack of confidence that he could actually do it, his lack of experience as a general. He hadn't put on a uniform for something like 20 years, and he's like sort of brought out of retirement, so to speak, to be the general, to take control. How much he got his ass kicked by the British, how we had hundreds of British ships sailing into New York, going up the Hudson. Like, that's just remarkable to even think about. There should be a movie about, based on that book, because sure, we have, the Mel Gibson movie, The Patriot, and all that stuff, which is cool, and I love that movie. But I think there's a whole other part of this history that we haven't really told the story of. And then obviously the book essentially ends with George Washington crossing the Delaware on Christmas night to attack the British, and that was sort of a turning point. I was let down because the book ends, and it's like, and that's the end of like 1776. I'm like, oh shit, this is literally 1776. It doesn't like go beyond that, and I was at the edge of my seat.
Yeah. Do you find yourself being the most interested in that period of time?
I go in and out of different things, so I'm very interested in that period in time. Prior to that, I took a lot of the reading recommendations from Jocko. I read About Face. That piqued a lot of curiosity. So many learnings from Hackworth on the battlefield, but also just in terms of our experience in war and our conflicts that we've gotten into, ranging from Korea to Vietnam to the modern ones that we were a part of. And it's just remarkable how my own perception of the conflicts that we should get into has changed through my own experience, but also how things really haven't changed that much in terms of like, Hackworth's disappointment with how the leadership was handling Vietnam. I can't help but question, like, what did we really accomplish in Korea? What did we really accomplish in Vietnam? What have we really accomplished in, any of these conflicts, the same ones that we've done, been a part of? And so I think there's something pretty serious that we as a country and our leaders need to, figure out.
Yeah.
I don't have the answers, but I think that there's a diagnosable issue across history, at least post-World War II.
No, I agree. I think World War II is the last time as a nation we handled it the right way from start to finish.
Yep.
I think you could pick any involvement we've had combat-wise overseas since then and find quite a few things wrong. Not that World War II was handled flawlessly, but if you look at it from, say, a Machiavellian principle of in justifying the means, like Japan and Germany, post-World War II, compared to every other place they've been, maybe Vietnam. I mean, I guess that's the one thing I will say about Vietnam now is in a place that, I think suits our interests well and their own compared to beforehand, but that's really the only one.
Have you read The Generals by chance?
I haven't.
I recommend it. I'm dated in my knowledge of recalling all of this because my memory's not as good as probably yours is. But I read it a few years ago, and it just talks through the history of American generalship, for lack of a better term, and how it was really sort of at its peak during the World War II era, and then it became much more career-oriented, and how during World War II, like if you fucked up and you lost a battle, like you'd get the can, you'd get fired, right? You'd get fired. Oftentimes, if you were a good guy and you just made some mistakes or what have you, you'd get the chance to come back and reset, take over, a training command, and then maybe get to go back, like if it was something that was deemed a little bit outside of your control. But it was pretty ruthless. Yeah. And you look at sort of modern times, when was the last time we fired some leadership? Yeah. And I think that's disappointing to me, because I know plenty of guys sort of at the junior ranks, the JOs, maybe not even JOs, but like the 05s, the senior enlisted, that end up getting the can, and for maybe rightfully so in some cases, but that's sort of where the accountability has, sort of starts and stops, unfortunately. I have a lot of conversations with some of the people that you've had on your show about this, and I think that there needs to be some more accountability up the chain of the command to the more senior levels versus just at the mid-tier senior enlisted and mid-tier officer levels.
Well, I think it's suffered the same fate as our political infrastructure in that the only place that accountability can come at those upper echelons is internally, really. And so just like it's like asking Congress to enact term limits or
Yeah.
investment, statutes or
Totally.
whatever. Yeah, it's like they're not going to.
Good luck.
Yeah, I mean, it's the fox auditing himself in the hen house.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to happen, So I agree. I don't know how you fix that because it's got to be something that they want to do. But I probably know the answer to this. If time travel was possible, where and when would you go?
I'd probably go back to be with Washington crossing the Delaware.
Yeah.
I mean,
Get it on a GoPro and slap it.
yeah,
on
seriously. I just think that it's such an incredible point in time. And to my point earlier, I wish it's something that we knew more about. Because I think behind any great leader, sometimes you have people that are just megalomaniacs and they're so self-confident and they know what they're going to accomplish and it's sort of like destiny. But that whole experience was not that, at least from David McCullough's book that I read.
Yeah.
And so I think experiencing that and the people who literally, so many of his troops lost confidence in him, and just sort of how did he get that back, and how did some momentum beget momentum for him to ultimately rise to be the first president of the United States and arguably the most important person in the history of our country.
Yeah. Do you think he would be proud of where America is at today?
George Washington? I don't think so.
Yeah. What do you think his biggest bitch would be?
Hard to say because I'm not a historian in George Washington and how he thought. I'm not a historian in the founding fathers and how they thought. But I think we've lost our way in a lot of different ways. And I think that we are more at war with ourselves these days than anybody else. I don't think that we have unity of purpose. I think we've lost the American dream in many ways in our country. I think it exists in isolated pockets, but I think there's a lot of animosity and a lot of tension across the entire country right now. I was raised on an almond farm in Central California, and I think we're all a byproduct of our upbringing and our experiences. Very rural upbringing, but I was taught that if you work hard and you don't complain, there's a lot of things outside of your control, but this is America. You can be whatever you want to be, and it rests on you, the individual. Those principles of individual liberty, individual freedom, manifest destiny, I think are things that are core to us as Americans. And I think that we've migrated to this point of what can the government sort of like do for me? How can I do things easier? I don't know if it's a societal thing, a cultural thing, a global thing, or if it's something that's unique to the United States. I think it has sort of like some global tentacles that are going out across the world. We're not the only country struggling with this. So I think that he would be surprised to see what's going on.
Yeah.
But it's also like, man, just think about the technology. Who would have thought that most of our information would be coming from X, Twitter these days? That, like it's just a completely different world. So it's like almost being we're probably like an alien race to our founding fathers in many ways, how different things are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's, from their perspective, it would be impossible to even imagine where we're at today in a number of ways. And to your point on, what's the root cause of the degradation of the American dream, I think it primarily rests on technology in most ways, in that it's not technology by itself, but it's making, generation after generation progressively lazier because they can be. It's like the first time in the species history really where life isn't really hard, comparatively. And so I think that changes more than just the cause and effect or the A plus B of this technology makes, exercise X easier, is that it changes the way we think, it changes the way we raise our kids, it changes the way our families operate. And I think, technology by itself has kind of crumbled the nuclear family because of that, whether it's, so many more women working or so fewer parental influence at home, whether it's a combination of social media and neither parent at home. And I think that's where it starts, is that, to your point, being a product of your upbringing, is that if that upbringing is latchkey, not like it was in the 80s or before, where you're outside and you're kind of figuring life out on your own. Now it's so heavily influenced by this fucking thing.
Totally.
Is that it completely changes the way human beings think as they're being raised. And
that thing's a devil. Like
it is.
It really is. I think it's the devil.
Yeah, I mean, it's a double-edged.
It's because it's a double-edged sword, because that's like how I'm super productive. It's how I get all my work done.
Yeah.
But I'm constantly attached to it, and there's lots of distractions that come from it as well. I was having a conversation with the same neighbor that I work out with, and he brought up an interesting observation that parenting, by virtue of that in social media, has changed so drastically from your parents certainly to you, and probably over the time that you're a parent, and now with my kids that are younger, like over the past 200 years prior to that, it was probably somewhat the same parental unit to parental unit in terms of how they raise the kids. Grandparents how they raise their kids, and the parents how they raise their kids. Not a lot really changed. You went to school. You probably worked on the farm, or you worked with the family business to a certain degree. You had normal bullying or people personality challenges where you didn't get along with people at school, and you had to resolve it and sort of figure it out and all of that stuff. Now it's just very different. Like the parenting advice, probably from my parents to me, is probably so much, like, I don't think they'd be able to totally contextualize the situation that kids are currently going through with social media and that peer pressure and all of that stuff that comes as a result of total connectivity and everything you say and do being captured and documented and held against you. It happens to adults, but I mean, to kids, they're just not prepared with that emotional intelligence of how to handle that. And I think it's something that we're going to struggle with as our kids get to that age. I mean, we've already had kids even in kindergarten, my oldest one, kids that have had smartphones in kindergarten. And we're like, well, we're not doing that. So we've had to band together with an allegiance of other parents that feel similar to us in terms of protecting our kids against some of those influences, while also embracing the reality that a lot of education and things like that are much more achievable by virtue of technology than they previously were. So it's tough, and I don't think that I've yet to find somebody that has totally figured it out.
Yeah, I think just being the biggest influence you can, and I would not implement smartphones until high school probably. But I think it's even bigger than that, though. Is that the phone is the double-edged sword. One side I think is a lot sharper than the other. I think there's more cons than there are pros, but even if you look at it from kind of more the 30,000 foot view technology-wise, 200-ish years ago, in the early to mid 1800s, the statistic was like 92 or 93% of all Americans were farmers. And if you think about the experience, the human experience of growing up on a farm where you understand, how the life cycle works, how, death feeds you where your food comes from, having to, spend a portion, and in many cases a significant portion of the day, every single day, just getting the things you need to survive. Like the mental health component of that, no different than if you disconnect and go camping for a week, and your entire day is gathering firewood, purifying water, fucking making your shelter more robust. I mean, it's doing things to just survive. Like the mental health catapult that happens during that is enormous.
I agree.
And so now with all of the other technological advances of just industry and livelihood, not, you remove the internet from it, is that now, back then I think Philadelphia, was the biggest city in the country, and it had like 45,000 people.
Wow.
And now it's just, again, like people from that era would not even recognize the world. I mean, I don't think they would even recognize human beings. And so all of those things combined, I think, is where we're at. And we could probably spend the whole show talking about that.
Yeah,
but,
I agree.
Do you have a favorite quote?
I don't think that I do, unfortunately. I go in and out of a lot of stuff, as I mentioned. I get really stuck on a topic, on books. I fixate on my choice of alcohol. For the longest time, I was, Moscow Mules. And I get burnt out of that. And then I went to whiskey. Yeah. It's like a 3-year thing. Yeah. So for whatever reason, I just sort of go on that. I'm on my thing, and I just stick with it for 3 years. So I don't have a favorite quote.
EDC wise, do you carry? I mean, living in California, I imagine you can't, or can you?
I am in the process of doing that. So I do have firearms. I carry, I have a .239. but I don't have my concealed carry license.
Yeah.
It's like one of these things. So a buddy of mine, we went through the process together, and it's like a year-long, list to even go through the certification process. So I just got to go through that process, and I've been a little lazy in terms of getting on the wait list because I have a hard time. I joke with my wife that I have macrophobia, which is fear of lines. And I don't know if it's actually a joke. And I looked it up because it's an actual thing, and nobody believed me until I looked it up on Google. I'm like, is fear of lines a real thing? And it turns out it's called macrophobia. And so any line, I can't do it. So getting in line for my CCW, I just can't do it. Just whatever.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, I don't know
so
why.
If you go to the movie theater and there's a big line, you're like, fuck this.
Dude, fuck this.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know why. If my wife gives me a lot of grief, she's like, there's a line because it's good, right? It's a line because it's popular and whatever. I'm like, listen, so if it's a restaurant, it's like, we got an hour wait. I'm like, dude, let's just go to the one with 0 wait.
Yeah.
And she's like, the reason why there's 0 wait is because the food sucks.
Yeah.
And which is logical. So that's why we're a good team, right? Yeah. So I think that we help each other in those regards.
It's weird that that's called macrophobia.
Yeah.
I would think that that's like the fear of the big picture, not
no,
lines,
I can double check. I could be wrong with the psychological definition, but I'm pretty sure it's macrophobia.
Huh. Do you have a specific morning routine? Like you
I
get
do.
What does that look like?
Every morning I get up, have my coffee, I take my supplements, my vitamins, use the restroom, and then I go work out. I have to do that every morning, or else I'm just a miserable person the rest of the day.
Specific time?
Yep. So I wake up at typically a little bit before 5:30. I need 30 minutes to sort of get my coffee going, take my supplements, do a quick stretch, and then 6 o'clock start for a workout.
What does the workout look like?
It depends. We typically sort of make it up every day, which isn't as regimented as previously. Ranging from squats, bench, pull-ups. Did Murph for Memorial Day. I'm pretty excited on my weighted Murph time, given that I'm an old dude now. Swim, run, little circuits. We do some rounds of circuits, so it's not really as regimented. I think the best shape I've ever been on was we had the TAP program, back when I was in the teams, and so the Tactical Athlete program. Guy over there running that put together, I think it was called the Everything Workout Program, which is for a guy who wants to run fast and have good aerobic capacity, but also be strong and deadlift like 500 pounds. I can't deadlift 500 pounds, but that regiment was very demanding. I think in the best shape I've ever been on. And so I'm thinking about dusting that off because it has Monday is like strength, Tuesday is like a Metcon, like Wednesday is aerobic, and then so on and so forth. Yeah. And I think that really helped me to be in great all-around fitness shape.
Yeah. You said we. Is that your neighbor?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it like a home improvement? You're looking over the fence?
Yeah, it sort of is. Yeah, except we lived across the alley from each other, and he has he retrofitted his garage to be a home gym. So he has a whole garage and all that stuff. So lucky for me, and I've been able to mooch off of him a little bit. Yeah. And he's a former chief, and so we have some good cool. Officer chief banter or senior chief banter.
In the teams or regular Navy?
No, he's the OD guy.
Yeah. Oh, okay, that's cool. You said you were originally from Central California on an almond farm. What was that like growing up?
I loved it because I think it was one of those things where if you didn't have anything to do, you went in the orchard, you ran around, you played in the mud. The irrigation was on, and so I had lots of mud fights, lots of imagination opportunities. And I think it was a great way to grow up. And now, being a young dad myself, I think of just where we live in San Diego, how much access we have to everything, and all the technology we have. You don't really have the just get outside and run around almost unsupervised. And we lived pretty far away from our nearest neighbor. I think our nearest neighbor was at least a quarter mile away, surrounded by almond orchards at our house. And so it was very much one of those things. You open the door, you just go outside and play around and climb some trees, break some things, shoot some BB guns, and try not to get in too much trouble, which I definitely shot some things that I shouldn't have. My dad's rain gauge, I remember shooting that and then lying about it, thinking I wasn't going to get caught, and insisting that it wasn't my BB hole that went through that thing, that it must have been something else. And so now I start to see similar things with my sons, not with the exact same story, but sort of like bending the truth a little bit.
Isn't it actually or technically pronounced almond?
Yeah, because they shake the L out of them.
Which is weird. It's like salmon, right?
Yeah, it's like salmon.
Yeah, nobody says that, though.
No,
Hardly.
I mean, in the Central Valley, almost everyone says almond or almond.
Really? Yeah.
But, everyone thinks that I have a speech impediment when I say that. So my buddies are like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, it's almond. I'm like, how do you pronounce salmon?
Yeah.
And
Salmon.
Yeah, salmon.
Yeah. Did you have siblings growing up?
I did. So I have an older half sister and a younger sister, but there's a pretty big age group between us. So for I think it's 7 years difference between me and my younger sister. My older one was already out of the house. So I was effectively like an only child in many ways for a big part of my upbringing. And with that age gap, by the time I'm in high school, it's just different.
Was growing up on that farm, almonds, is that a lucrative, or was that a fairly lucrative?
It's like any other commodity. It goes in, ups and downs. It definitely wasn't during my upbringing. I remember the experience being, tough is the wrong word, but it wasn't something where, we felt like it was a lavish lifestyle. But some of my dad's friends and some of our family friends, just over time through hard work and vigor and timing and good luck, have built up sort of like an almond empire, where they've just amassed thousands, hundreds of thousands, or maybe not hundreds, but tens of thousands of acres, and vertically integrated their entire operation from the actual farm to the hulling and shelling to the processing to ultimately the sales of the product. And so some people have done really, really well. And there's been booms and busts. So the price per pound of almonds when I was younger, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it got down to like $1 a pound. And then about 10 years ago, it got up to like $5 a pound. And then it's since crashed and is about, I think it's like $2.30 a pound, something like that right now. So obviously you have to inflation adjust all of this to normalize what that means across time. But needless to say, you don't break even when it's, probably below $2 a pound. You don't break even, you lose money. And when you're $5 a pound, like, you're doing great.
Yeah. Did you eat a shitload of them?
I still do. I fucking love them.
Drink almond milk?
I don't drink the milk. That's blasphemy. I know some people in the industry think of that. I think that's some nonsense. So I think milk's meant to come from an animal. All this fake, other crap that we have these days, I think is doing us more harm than good. Probably similar to your dog food business, right? You got to think about the ingredients that are going into these things. And I don't think that humans if you look at just the ingredients, it's just sugar and processed shit. Sure, there's some nuts in there, but it's not like this is just pure almond milk, almond juice.
Did you play other sports other than swimming?
I did. So when I was younger, I did the same things that my kids are doing now. Baseball, flag football, soccer, all that kind of stuff, basketball. And I don't remember really being bad at it. But I don't remember being good at it either. And I was very hesitant to swim for the longest time. My mom was a pretty good swimmer. She made it to Olympic trials back in her day. Oh, wow. And so she'd always said, hey, you should swim. You might like it. And I was like, I don't want to wear a Speedo. That shit's embarrassing, right? Because you're out there, right? You're out there. And she's like, listen, whatever, just try it out. And I started at the Shafter Stingrays, which is the name of our small town. Shafter is a town of, 10,000 people, at least back then, so pretty small. That was the nearest town to us. It was about 15 minutes away. And so I started there just doing age group swimming on the summer. And we had a pool in our backyard, and so my mom would help me to learn the strokes and all that stuff and bribe me to swim some laps, which is, I forget what it was, like a quarter, a lap or something like that. And so if I do that over the summer, I'd make, $20 or something. And so I was actually okay, especially as a newcomer into the sport, had some natural, affinity towards it. But once I started on the Shafter Stingrays, I just started loving it. And it's hard for me to fully, I was a kid. I think I was 10 or 11 when I first did some age group meets. So it's hard for me to remember exactly why I loved it so much. Partially, I know, because it's hot as shit on the outskirts of Bakersfield, California in the summer. It's like Texas, It's hot. Yeah. What do you want to do? You want to cool off in the mud, or you want to cool off in the backyard pool? And if I get to do a sport, it's almost unbearable to do any other sports in the summertime out there when it's 110. So doing something in the water was definitely bearable. But it was the first time in my life that I got to see the direct correlation between my hard work in and my effort in and my performance out. It's a lesson that I wish everybody would learn at a young age, and it's something that I've taken with me throughout my entire life. In spite of the frustrations and the ups and downs on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis, sort of trusting the process of if you put in the work and you put in that foundation, you can sort of map to personal and professional and athletic improvement.
Do you ever feel like AI is moving faster than your business? Or maybe you're stepping into a new leadership role and wondering how to lead with confidence. That's where IDOU comes in. They offer online courses from world-renowned design firm IDEO. And these aren't your typical lectures. You'll learn how to pair human-centered design with AI tools to boost creativity, uncover insights, and also lead smarter. Whether you're solving tough team problems or just want to sharpen your edge, IDOU's practical frameworks and hands-on approach make the learning stick and fast. Class starts soon, so enroll today. For a limited time, IDOU is offering my listeners 15% off site-wide. Go to idou.com/micdrop. That's IDEOU.com/micdrop, all caps, all one word, for 15% off. IDEOU.com/micdrop.
And in swimming, you can see it on the scoreboard, right? You get to see it with the times that you put up. You get to see it every single swim meet, and you can get to go back and you get to see it every practice in terms of your times and what you're dropping, and if you're doing better sets than you've ever done before. So you have a pretty quick feedback loop in terms of understanding if you're doing better or not. Over time, and as you get better in the sport, it becomes harder to decipher because you need to rest and all these other things that sort of like impact it. But when you're younger, it's pretty simple. Just show up, do what coach says, work harder, be consistent, and your times will improve. And I think that's the way sort of everything works in life. If you're consistent and you put in an honest day's work or an honest practice work, and you're not a total puss, you're going to make a lot of progress.
What age were you when you started?
I think I started officially when I was 11, so pretty late.
Yeah. I mean, shit, I started at 5 and still didn't.
You should have been better than me, Mike.
I should have been. I don't know what happened. Did you recognize or realize really early on that you were better than most kids? I mean, were you good right away?
It was a progression. I think it's one of those things, big fish, small pond analogy, that I think worked concentric circles over time. Again, I was in a town of 10,000 in Shafter. And so I wasn't the best on my team for even my age, but I was keeping up with the kids who had been doing it for 5 years. And that was confidence boosting for me. I was young for my grade. So the fact that I was keeping up with people that are older than me in my grade who'd been doing it for longer was confidence boosting. And relative to how I was doing in other sports, it's like, well, it became a little bit natural that I should focus in something that I was doing better at. And there's a psychological feedback loop on that as well, where it's more fun to do something that you're doing well at than it is to do something you suck at. Yeah. It's just, it just is in life. If you feel like you're doing a good job, you feel better and you want to keep doing more of it. And so I think that definitely started happening. I didn't realize, at that age that I was going to go to the Olympics, at least not that I can recall. My mom told me that I told her I wanted to go to the Olympics after watching the '96 Olympic Games. How old was I then? I must have been right around the time that I started swimming. It must have been when I was around 11 or 12. But I don't recall that. The first time where I really thought that I had a shot at it was probably around 2001, 2000. Because I gotten pretty good at high school. I went to sort of like our CIF, which I don't even remember what that stands for, effectively like our states, basically broken up by region in California because it's a big state. And, finaled in that my first year in high school. And for whatever reason, I'd always had these pretty lofty goals and aspirations. So much so that I had some coaches in my younger years who told me I needed to set more realistic goals. But I was pretty stubborn, still am, and effectively thought, you want me to set, you want me to tone down my goals of what I want to achieve. Probably didn't think "fuck you" back then, but now that's how I think about it, right? Like I said, screw you. Like don't stifle my ambition, and use that as fuel to my fire to take me in my career. And so it wasn't until I think sophomore year that I'm like, all right, I'm getting pretty fucking good. Yeah, I'm getting pretty good. And I think it was around my junior year. I think sophomore year is where I made my first national cut. Had the opportunity to go to nationals. I made that cut, I believe, at zones that we had in Hawaii, which was a great time. It was a lot of fun. Like all the families and kids, we all went to Hawaii and we got to swim in a meet in Maui. I mean, pretty amazing. Yeah. I remember that was just an awesome experience because I think I was like the one of 2 kids at zones to make the national cut. So it was a big deal, like on the pool deck. It was a big deal to make it for kids at that age. And then went to spring nationals the next summer, which I believe was in 2002. Went to spring nationals. And then made my first national team at summer nationals, which in making the national team is effectively you get top 2. It's like Olympic trials. Effectively, you get top 2 in an individual event or top 6 in a relay. You're on the national team effectively.
Man, that's fascinating. I mean, from a coaching standpoint, was there a shift or a pivot for you at all, or at a specific time where you and or your coaches realized that you were at that level and you went with a better or different coach, or did you stick with the same?
Yeah. No, that's a really interesting time in my life that I think back on periodically. I don't think a lot. We have, at that point I'd moved to I started training in Bakersfield, which is 30 minutes away from where I grew up.
Also the Valley Fever capital.
Totally, I know you had that shit, but you didn't. I don't understand. I don't think you went to Bakersfield to get it.
Out at an island of all places. Yeah.
You're welcome. So Valley Fever is a big problem there. I remember growing up; it was always on the news, and I think it spun up and spun down. Like, I don't know. It's what is that? Is that like some spores or some crazy shit?
Yeah, it's a fungal spore that lives in super arid climates.
Yeah.
I want to say it's like anything that gets less than maybe 7 inches of rain a year, it can survive. Doesn't necessarily mean it's always present.
And then with all the dust that kicks up, it's sort of like,
you breathe it in, and as soon as it settles in your lungs, it grows like the way mold would grow on bread, and then scars your lung tissue.
Dude, that's nasty shit.
Yeah.
Are you still feeling it?
Yeah, I lost 40% of my lung capacity.
40%?
Yeah, they tried to medically retire me, but I was like, I had planned on trying to screen, which obviously that didn't happen. But the captain at the infectious disease clinic at Balboa said, "Hey, we're going to medically retire you," and I was just like, "Is there a way to avoid that?"
Yeah.
I don't have a college degree. My first child's on the way. I wasn't planning on getting out of the military, and now you're telling me, you're going to have maybe $3,000 a month to live off of with nothing. And I was just like, can we figure something else out? And a big shout out to, I won't say his name, he may not want me to say it, but a master chief who was at SQT at the time that I was working for, just, negotiated or worked a deal with the Buds master chief, and they said, we'll move you away, because the problem was, they're freshly injured, like it's in recession. You've conquered the disease, but that scarring is permanent, and it's going to take a fair bit of time for your lungs to sort of recover from that, or at least get used to the damage and however you look at it, I guess. And they said, you need to stay away from anything that's irritating to your lungs. And I was like, well, every fucking thing we do is lung irritants, other than being at the center. And even then, like working hell weeks, and there's parts of it that are pretty gnarly. But they managed to work that deal out. I went over to Buds for 3 years and got my degree, had both kids, and developed the plan to start the dog company, and got out after that. So it was a forced pivot, but I went through it, and that was it. But
did anybody else get it? You're the only dude.
Well, not out at an island. When I was at
there wasn't like 3 dudes or whatever that got it.
No, I was the only one that got it.
I was the PI. I think we had one dude with was it fucking dengue fever or something, like some mosquito borne. Obviously very different, but everyone's like worried about
syphilis.
Yeah, they probably had that too out there. But that motherfucker went to the hospital. It was close, right? It wasn't good.
Yeah, well, so just before I got it, maybe a year or two before I got it, Sniper used to be up at Coalinga. Right by Bakersfield, and there were like 15 dudes that got it really bad, and like the entire Sniper class got it, and most of them were medically retired from it. So it's one of those
talk about a risk to force, man. That's not good.
Yeah, so that's why they moved it out to Atterbury in Indiana, and why they don't go there anymore. But anyway, so back to Bakersfield, I guess. So you're the coaching shift.
Yeah. So. Effectively, you have the coaches that you have, right? And so, it's not like, it wasn't really like at the time, a super desirable location to be a coach, because there's typically not a lot of Olympians coming out of the area. There were a few in my generation, interestingly. So it was, I think, a good time to be coming from there. So I don't think it was a coaching thing necessarily. I think that I was just, fortunately a little bit unique, a little bit different, and was willing to put in the hours. So much so that even before I had my driver's license, I convinced my parents to take me to 24-hour fitness on days where we didn't have morning practice.
Wow.
So that I could swim by myself and put it in. And that's something that I just think is atypical. Most people didn't do.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I think I just wanted to win. I wanted to maximize my performance. I wanted to be as good as I possibly could be. And I felt, I don't know, very team guy-ish that, it was before those days, obviously, that if you weren't, giving it your all, that you were being a shitbag.
Yeah.
And for me, I went and did that. There's many times during that time frame where on more than a handful of occasions, I'd show up and be there waiting with my parents in the car at 5 a.m. and the coach wouldn't show up. Like they'd sleep in or they'd forget or whatever. And I'd be like the only dude there. And so, but that said, like I think they did a lot for me to help bring me to that next level. And so when I made the national team and went to my first international competition is when I sort of thought that I should probably make a change. And I ended up moving down to Southern California. So I left my junior year, or after my junior year of high school, I left Bakersfield and moved by myself down to Southern California, down to Mission Viejo to swim for a team there. And so I went to school there for that year.
How does that living? I mean, did you
Live with the host
coach?
family. So it's actually more typical than I would have ever thought, and I'd currently think. So there's people that are, it's primarily international folks who are like, decent in their sport, in this case swimming, that would come to Mission Viejo. I'm sure it exists other places. I'm just unaware of it. And there's like some other people on the team that would host you, and you'd live with them. And at that point, obviously I have a driver's license, so I take myself to high school and back. But I'm living with another family, but sort of doing my own thing.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I didn't realize that existed either. Making that shift from what you were used to now this new team, new coaches, new facility, was it eye-opening in terms of like were the workouts, were you just like, holy shit, did I bite off more than I could chew? Like,
I think that I did in hindsight. It was probably the hardest year of my life, that time frame. Because I went into it a little quick, and I think like at a high level, it sort of makes sense. Like, you're really good at this. You should maximize, your opportunity to make the Olympics. Swim with another team. Like obviously, my family's not going to just completely leave their jobs, their friends, like everything to go with me. And I thought I was mature enough to be able to handle it myself. But high school was hard for me too. Like it took me until probably my junior year to feel like I fit in. I didn't feel like I fit in my freshman and sophomore year.
in what way?
I was scrawny. I did freshman football. I was bad at it. Got made fun of. All those kinds of like normal things, I guess you would say. When the high school I went to in Bakersfield, I think there was one, like my K through 8 was the same guys and gals, 25 folks, K through 8, the same, pretty small in the middle of an almond orchard. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, I'm thrown into, over 100 people per class, and I don't know any of them, like zero. I guess 2, because 2 of them came from my school, so I knew 2. And so
that's still pretty small.
It's still pretty small. And then so I went into that, and I had a really hard adjustment because everybody sort of like came with their friend groups from the neighboring, junior highs and what have you. So it was sort of an outsider, and that was really hard for me. I don't think that I just had no thought that it would be hard. So I went in there, and I just really didn't have a group that I fit in with. So it took me a while to like find, my colleagues, find the people I got along with. And then, frankly, it was the same thing again, but worse, going down to Mission Viejo, because instead of, if it was bad going from 25 kids in a grade to 100 for me, because I was coming from, a small town, now there was like 400 a grade, or maybe more at Mission Viejo High School. And again, stepping into that same situation where people have known each other and gone to school together for 3 years, groups already formed. And I'm an outsider coming in. Yeah. And in this case, I really didn't know anybody except for the swim team folks. And so that was really hard for me. I look back on that and wonder if I actually would have done better, because I think my mental health would have been better if I just stayed in Bakersfield, even if it didn't have the sort of like same coaching prowess and curriculum of what I had in Mission Viejo. I think it's a little bit up for debate. I might have, and going there, just dealing with the workouts weren't the hard thing. They're hard, they suck. Don't get me wrong, but of the things that I was dealing with at the time, that wasn't the thing that was the challenge for me. Well, it was really just that was my escape. That was my escape.
I mean, to me, yeah, it's impossible to know if it would have shaken out different.
Yeah.
But I think maybe that's what allowed you to do it. Is that if now
totally.
All of a sudden swimming is the escape, who knows?
Who knows? Totally. Yeah, I don't know. But it's just it's the one, lots of people say live back with no regrets and all that stuff. And I agree. I, by and large, zero regrets. I've been very fortunate and happy to do everything I've done. That's the one that I'm not sure. I don't regret it. I'm just not sure.
Right. Did you see a marked improvement in your performance once joining that team?
The first year, not really. And then I stayed with them the second year, and I had a huge time drop.
Yeah.
And I think that it's been something consistent against my swimming career that I did the best when the pressure was the highest. I don't know why. Yeah. But definitely did the opposite of what they teach you in the military training, where you never rise to the occasion, you rise to the level of your training.
Yeah.
I trained my ass off. I did really well. But I definitely rose to the occasion, in those cases. So my best performances were at the Olympic Games. And I had many meets, years between those, where I was not doing that great. And a lot of times I had a ton of self-doubt on if I could even do it. But for whatever reason, when the stage was big, I was able to get up and, put it all on the line and do, I think, the best I could. Yeah.
I assume you finished high school there?
Yes.
And then what was the path like from there working up to the Olympics?
Yeah.
Did you go to college?
I did. So I got recruited to USC, and which was just an awesome time frame too. I mean, I think very few, proportionally, people have the opportunity to get recruited to a school. Something I really haven't thought about probably since then, how lucky I was to be recruited by these programs, to be recruited by Michigan, Arizona, Stanford, USC, and to frankly, because I was pretty good, have the pick of the litter of where I wanted to go.
Why USC and not any other ones?
At the time, the head coach was the men's Olympic head coach at the time, a guy named Mark Schubert, and he was a legendary coach, especially in my discipline and the things that I swam. He helped to create some of the best people in our country's history in that event. One of which was there, a guy named Eric Vent, who was sort of it was like me and Eric. Eric was the top guy, and I wanted to go train with the best and be with the best. And there's a few other folks there, and some that came in later that ended up being the best and still beating me, that came internationally. So I was recruited to USC. It was close enough to home, only 2 hours from Bakersfield, so a hop over the Grapevine, pretty easy. I love Southern California. I think it's a great place to live. And I think it had, of all the different schools, I think a unique blend of athletics and academics, where it wasn't really sort of over-optimized necessarily for either. I think Stanford very optimized for academics and maybe at the expense of athletics. And it was a great time to be there. I mean, it's when our football team was good. Yeah. If the football team's good, it makes everything good. It's when we had Reggie and Matt and all these guys winning the Heisman trophies and winning national championships. And so it was a pretty exciting time to be at that school.
Were the swim workouts in college, were they at that next level where compared to even with the team in Mission Viejo?
Were, but I mean, college, there's a lot more distractions. And so...
What do you mean?
Yeah, exactly. So it's not only school, but, obviously the partying and stuff like that and going out. And it's remarkable. Now, the amount I used to drink back then, probably most college kids back then was like a fish or like a sailor before I was one. Yeah. And so it was intense. And, I think it's a miracle that I was actually still as good as I was given that sort of negative habit. Yeah. And I would encourage kids these days, I think kids these days are actually more mature than we were. I think we were just hard. It's sort of like old school teams, probably before, right when I was getting there, maybe a little before, the drinking was heavy, but you still worked your ass off with it, and you were doing both. So you're burning the candle at both ends. Yeah. That was sort of the culture.
Well, that for sure conditioned you to deal with the SEAL team.
Exactly. Yeah, it was just the normal thing.
Yeah. Well, I actually saw a fascinating statistic the other day as it relates to generations and the amount of money they spend on alcohol.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was boomers, Gen X, millennials, and it was 20 some billion annually on alcohol.
Okay.
And then it went to Gen Z, and it was like 3 billion.
Yeah.
Like, so, and I think it's the same way in the SEAL teams.
Yeah.
I mean, talking to the handful of guys that I still know that, still have some involvement in the community that I was in with, said that, like, the culture of platoon life is vastly different that way. It's way more about optimizing recovery and training smart, and
Totally.
like, they go out way less and do way less of that shit, which I do think ultimately is good. However,
It's a good thing,
I do think that there is a benefit to the, almost the tribe-like mentality.
The camaraderie and all that
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, it's weird. I mean, I remember when I was thinking about getting the teams, like, what is it? What's Marchenko's books? It's like Rogue Warrior and stuff like that. Yeah. We talked a lot in there about like the drinking culture that they had, in Team 6 at the time, and how it like built camaraderie, unlike other things. And I think it does. I don't know why, but that's my experience. Like when you go out as a team, like even if you're training as a team, there's something extra about blowing off steam as a team that that actually makes the bond even closer.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is.
No, well, I think it's alcohol. I mean, it changes your mental state, and so you're tapping into parts of your brain where you're working really hard in this dangerous environment and pushing the envelope nonstop, and now you're kind of doing the same thing, but on the other side of that coin. And I think, I think it changes the dynamic of groups that way. But I am curious, at USC, did you go to the Olympics from or during your time at USC?
I did. So my freshman year, and then my second one was after I graduated. And I stuck around for a year after I graduated. Graduated in 2007, and the next games was in 2008. So after my freshman year, and then after I graduated.
And so does the training for the Olympics, how do you kind of navigate or balance that with training on the team, or is it totally different?
It's the same. It's the same. So, I mean, it's basically no different than high school. You still do your double days. You still do your effectively 10 workouts a week. You do a double on Monday, Tuesday, single on Wednesday, double Thursday, Friday, single on Saturday. Sunday would be off. And that's pretty consistent throughout the season. And that's what the college team's doing. It just so happened. So training for the Olympics is just basically no different. I'm still just training, right?
Is the taper different? Like, is it longer? Is it more intense leading up to it? I wouldn't say it's much different. So I think that for us, we taper for NCAAs, and then we taper in the summer. So basically two tapers a year, which for people that don't know what tapering is, it's like you work really hard, you're getting your ass kicked all season, and you have like a couple weeks to a month of sort of like, a lighter workload that, in theory makes you more rested and better performant for the actual race. Did you find that to be true?
I did. I think now, to the topic of what kids are doing these days, I think they're more disciplined. They're taking care of their bodies better. I used to think that it was just all mental toughness, especially in my races, that like the hardest dude is the one that's going to win. That's true, but the hardest dude who also takes care of himself is the one that's going to win, not just the pure hard dude. And so I think I was pretty hard, by virtue of practicing other people wouldn't, and by virtue of like, I pulled some all-nighters, went straight to the pool, and literally lit the world on fire. Like my coach, I'm sure, knew or had a suspicion. So my best workouts ever were literally pretty much straight from going out the night before into the pool, and lit the world on fire, like almost breaking the American record in the morning from a push after being out all night. Wow. And so, but like that's obviously not the right way to do things, right? Like with age and maturity and what have you, I've learned that. And I think fortunately the Gen Zers sort of like know that innately, and they take more care of themselves. And I think their tapers are different. I think now how they periodize training is more efficient than what we did, where it's just like you're gonna get your ass kicked for 9 months out of the year, and then you're gonna taper for a couple other months. Now I think they're actually like being more intelligent about when they hit it hard and when they don't. Yeah. It's like in the SEAL teams. Like you do Hell Week once, unless you have to come back for whatever reason, or you get rolled or what have you. But you don't do Hell Week every year. That shit's not sustainable. Yeah. And I think in some of these sports with sort of like the old school mentality, it was like doing something like that, not as extreme, but same philosophy. It's as if you're doing Hell Week like every year or every month or whatever. And it's just, that's not a good way to build yourself up.
Yeah, I think you see the same thing in wrestling, like collegiate wrestling. There's still a lot of kind of old school, just fucking rake you over the coals
Yeah.
and grind it out until the last minute, and they're starting to be smarter about it. But at the height of training for the Olympics, do you recall what the most amount of yardage you put in a single day was?
We did a workout of 20 1500s one day.
Holy shit.
That was my idea.
Did you get hazed afterwards?
Well, I was reading this book. I think it was called, it was 3 champions, 1 gold medal, 4 champions, 1 gold medal. It was about the 1976, I believe, the work up to that for the mile. Bobby Hackett, Brian Goodell, and a few other folks. I forget the other guys' names. And sort of like their training leading up to that. And Coach Schubert, who was the coach of Brian Goodell at the time, who ended up winning the gold medal, he decided on Christmas Day they were going to do a workout. It was like the workout of all workouts. It was going to be 10 1500s. And I went to my coach. My coach wasn't Mark Schubert at that point. It was Bill Rose, and said, "Want to show these guys that these guys were weak? These guys in the 70s thought they were tough. We're going to be fucking tough. How about we double it? Let's do 20." And he's like, "I like where your head's at, but like let's put some barriers on this, because like it's a good idea. We want you to be tough and all this stuff, but like let's put some barriers." So we put some, like, I think we had to do them, I think on the 20-minute interval with, I forget, you had to have like 2 minutes of rest or something like that. There's some like trick in the equation where like you had to sort of like pace yourself. You couldn't just do them to do them. There was like some speed elements and a certain amount of rest you had to do. I think I got through 18 of them before I missed my cutoff, and he sort of like pulled me out of the water. So I didn't get all 20. I got 18. And I forget exactly what the time was. I think we had to do them on like, I forget what it was, but that was the longest I think workout I've ever done. So it was like a 18-mile day, in a single workout.
I imagine that's the only workout you did, like a short warm-up and then 18, 1500.
Yeah, it was just like, I don't know what we did, like 500 or 1,000 warm-up, get it going, then ready to go.
Man. Dude, that's crazy. So
yeah, if I had to do that right now, dude, I'd die. Like, there's no chance.
Yeah, it'd be like swimming in syrup.
Yeah, no chance.
So even in your, like, again, at the height of the lead up to the Olympics, like some of the 2-a-day ball breaker workouts, you didn't do that
I don't
mileage.
think so. Because what is that even? So, 1,500 times 10 is, 15,000. So double that effect would be 30,000. We never did a 30,000 day, know. They're typically, I think, 10,000 a practice was pretty routine.
Yeah.
Times 2. So 20,000 was pretty routine. And so sometimes we probably go a little bit over that, but that was pretty routine.
Yeah, wow. I remember doing workouts like in high school that for me were a dick dragger, like when we did 50/50s on 50.
Yeah.
Those types of things that, there were workouts where we put in, I think, in the upwards of 10,000, but that's just makes my head
I think
hurt.
it's just like, it's different times, man. Like back then it was just like the more you do, like the better. It wasn't until Coach Salo took over at USC and worked with me through my second Olympics that he turned the paradigm on his head. He was known as a sprint coach, had brought up a lot of our American world record holder sprinters, had never coached a distance guy. And so he's like, hey, effectively he's like, hey, I'm looking for your trust that I can train a distance guy and that you guys stay here and you don't like transfer and leave. And it was me and Os, and we stayed, and Os won a gold in the 1,500, and I won the bronze in the 400. And he went on to win the gold in the 10K as well. And so clearly that adaptation of just like, we're going to sprint the mile was his. He's like, when you think about it, across all other sports, like in swimming, the mile is like the distance thing, and that's a long race. But dude, that shit's 15 minutes. Like, it's not that long. It's not really an endurance race.
Yeah, it's not
like doing
2
Murph
hours.
the other day. It's like whatever, 30 minutes plus whatever. Like like that's still short, all things considered. It's not like a marathon.
Yeah,
compared
to a marathon.
Yeah, it sucks, but it's not as bad as people think.
Yeah. Can you walk us through what it's like going to the Olympics?
Yeah.
I mean, you did it twice. Was there a huge disparity between the two, or was it pretty similar?
I mean, the first one I was a rookie. The second one I'd sort of been there, was sort of a veteran. Maybe it's the difference between first deployment, second deployment. I've only done 2 deployments. I guess it's maybe a trend. I do 2 things and then punch. So I did 2 Olympics and punched, 2 deployments and punched. I don't know. Maybe it's a problem with me. And whereas all my contemporaries, Lochte, Phelps, and all those guys, they went on for, many, many other Olympics as well and did a great job. But the first one, I think, was particularly special for me because it's my first, so really important.
And it's
in Athens, the birthplace of the modern Olympic Games. They put the olive wreath on your head when you win a medal on the awards stadium and all that stuff. It was just an amazing experience to be there. So when you check in, before the Olympics, you have a training camp where, or I guess backtracking slightly, you have Olympic trials. Everyone watches Olympic trials, and whoever makes that gets a seat on the team. You get a couple days off, go back home, say hi, pack up your shit, and you go to Olympic training camp, which is effectively 3 weeks. And Olympic training camp is just, get back a little bit more of a base, at least in my case. So work hard for another couple weeks and then sort of like restart your taper again. And the Olympic coaches are a little bit unknown until after the Olympics. The teammates are a little bit unknown, although we all knew each other from being on the national teams and at NCAAs and at nationals together and all that stuff. So we already sort of like pretty much everyone knew each other and had a pretty close relationship. So it was really cool to train together as Team USA, where we knew that we were going as the U.S. Olympic swim team to go and try and smoke everybody else. And for us, we have a healthy rivalry with the Australians broadly because they're fantastic swimmers, especially for the size of their population. They're just really, really good. And I had a particular rivalry with Grant Hackett and Ian Thorpe. They might not have thought that I was their rival because they beat me, but for me, like that was like they had a tiger or a target on their back, and I was gunning for them. And so training together as a team, then you get to the Olympic Village. And I think one of the most amazing things about it is seeing all the other athletes across disciplines and across the country. It's really a special thing. You get to see the gymnasts that are yay high. They're short, like way shorter than you'd ever think. And then you have the swimmers that look sort of like a skinnier version of what I look like now. And then you got like the weightlifters that are just fucking huge. And you got like, our NBA players like LeBron and Kobe at the time and all that stuff that are just enormous and like celebrities. You got, all those guys. You see like, Roger Federer in the Chow Hall, right? Well, they didn't call it the Chow Hall. What do we call it? Dining hall, whatever. I am blurring language at this point. Yeah. But yeah, and so you go into that and they have all the food from all the different countries because it's a complicated operation. You have people who have a whole lot of different diets they're used to. You got, dudes from Korea and Japan, then you got some folks from the Middle East and Africa, the United States, and you got the, what do the Brits eat? That like blood pie thing? You got all this crazy shit, right? You got to feed all these people with like what they're used to. Yeah. And so it's a huge thing and pretty neat to go in there and see. Yeah.
Was the food good? I mean,
no, dude, it was not good. At least then. And so it's funny, like we had like the American cuisine was, our sponsors. Yeah. McDonald's. Jesus. So that was the American cuisine. And so we had other things, and most people stayed away from the McDonald's, with a few exceptions on Team USA. There's some guys, gold medalists, world record holders. They had McDonald's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Wow. Just cranked it. And I'm like, and I remember one of them was my roommate. And I was like, dude, you're going to fucking lose. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're eating like total shit. Yeah. Like, and then I think day 1, gold medal. Wow. And I'm like, motherfucker.
Fueled by McDonald's.
Motherfucker. Yeah. Should be an advertisement. Yeah. And then I'm like, well, if this guy, like my roommate is clearly not taking care of himself, and I was pretty straight edge, like especially leading into that. I'm eating my broccoli and my chicken and whatever, my noodles, my pasta. I'm like, dude, I'm gonna whoop this guy's ass. So it was pretty cool that like you have a roommate there too, and you get the opportunity to, have that. It's sort of like the barracks. You have like that rivalry / support of your roommate, and like seeing his medal and being like, wow, man, like you did it. I'm so proud of you. Like it's my turn, and having that support. That's pretty neat.
Can you eat any of the other countries' food? Or
yeah, it's sort of like open for anybody. So I remember in Beijing, the Peking duck, that was actually good. I just loaded up on Peking duck. Yeah.
I hope if any place it's good.
Yeah, exactly. It might have been dog though. Who knows?
Yeah, you never know. Do you get to know athletes in other disciplines fairly well? Like, are you interacting with basketball players and gymnasts?
A little bit. In '08, we had a lot more interaction with Team USA basketball. I don't know why, but they came to our meet. We went to theirs, or their games and all that stuff. So it was pretty neat. So you do a little bit, but I think it's just, I'd say it's like Team USA swimming. That's sort of the nucleus. That's like the family. Then it probably spills out into swimming in general. And the reason is we've gone to so many international meets with all these other swimmers for the past however many years. Yeah. We already know each other. We'll go out after the swim meets together, wherever we're at around the world, even though the coaches try and keep us, and say don't get out in trouble. And of course, someone goes out and gets in trouble and drinks too much and gets in trouble and causes sort of like an incident in whatever country we're in. It's just like the Navy. So we knew like the other swimmers like all really well. So it starts with USA swimming, then swimming as a whole, and then probably Team USA, outside of that. But it's, less common because we don't like see the gymnasts any other time, like ever, other than like those couple weeks.
Yeah. Similar to the Navy, is there a hookup culture at all? I mean, you've got all these young world-class athletes that, perfect physiques. Like, is there an element?
It definitely exists. I mean, but I think it's more. It's not limited to the Olympics, right? Because like you're with like the guys and girls on most college teams like swim together. Yeah. And so who do people tend to date? Like the people that they're with, like sort of all the time, right?
The work wife.
Yeah, the work wife. So it happens a lot there, and then it happens sort of like as you get into like the national team. You have like, and plenty of these people are married now. So it's like, it's like actually you get to know these people really well to international trips. And maybe it starts as like a fling, but it like, grows into something more. So obviously the tabloids and what have you will make it seem like the Olympics is like this crazy rager. That's true in part, but not in totality, just like anything else that's out there. I think it's mostly clickbait. I think it's true in part in the same way that like, we've all worked so hard and been so disciplined for so long. And the second you're done, like you're done with your last race, it's like time to let the hair down. Everyone's going out. Everyone's having a good time. But it's sort of staggered. Yeah. Swimming finishes after the first week. And then track and field is still going for like another 10 days. Yeah. And those poor marathon runners, last event, last day, like they get like one night to go out until like the flame is extinguished. Yeah. Whereas the rest of us, we have the opportunity to go out in town. We can check, they have pretty strict rules about it. You have to check out of the village. So you stop being like Team USA's liability at some point in many cases. At least that's what it became at some point. So most folks will check out of the village and just get a hotel room and be out in town. Yeah. But we also get preference on seats, so you get to go see the other disciplines and being there and watching Usain Bolt break the world record is still pretty cool. Like we're done with swimming and then we go watch like the water polo and their medal match, and instead of like being on the field, we get to drink some beers and watch them do it. So it's pretty neat.
That's awesome, man. Is there something that would surprise most people about the entire Olympic experience that you wouldn't expect?
That's a tough question. I'm sure something will come to me.
Or is there something that surprised you that you weren't expecting?
Maybe it's because I've just been accustomed to it that it's hard for me to think of any sort of surprises, like in hindsight. I'm sure there's probably something out there, but maybe it's just too obvious for me at this point that nothing really seems that surprising. And people are working their asses off. It's 4 years until the next Olympics. Yeah. In most sports, at least Olympic sports like swimming, nobody cares truly about any other competition. NCAAs don't matter. World championships don't matter. Pan Pacs don't matter. Any of those things. I mean, they matter, but they matter sort of an order of magnitude less than the Olympic Games. Yeah. And so I guess that's something that's a little bit surprising, or at least eye-opening, is the crown jewel is winning the Olympic gold medal and an individual Olympic gold medal. Yeah. I know guys that have gold medals on a relay and like bronze medals individually, and they don't even bring out their gold medal from the relay, and they only talk about like the bronze. Wow. So I guess that's a little bit surprising.
So I guess in that same realm, is there a level of surrealness when you're on the podium representing the country, getting a medal put around your neck?
Yeah, dude, it's hard not to like
what's going through your mind?
Like it's remarkable because it's like the culmination of years of just shit. It's like, it's like I don't know. It's like being like a Navy SEAL or something like that. Everyone assumes like, you know, the big op or whatever, being a SEAL is like that is sort of like the thing, that it's like that every day, but you're just like grinding and just pushing and like every day. It's not glamorous. It's not what pop culture or what people at home think it is every single day. It's like just grinding, putting it in. And so to have like that experience like all culminate and crest with finishing a race where you gave it literally everything you got, like to the point of like, I remember maybe I was, you know, a psycho, but I'm like, dude, I'm gonna like, if I just die in the pool, I just die in the pool. Like they can just fish me out. I'm gonna push to that point.
Yeah.
And like, so you finish and you feel like you literally can't stand up. You got nothing left. And then 10 minutes later, you find yourself on the award podium. Unfortunately, in my case, I never heard the American national anthem going up there. I'd have probably been bawling like a baby if I had that happen. But still, it was pretty close, like because it's quite an achievement.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, speaking of the gold being the pinnacle in an individual event, and that's what everybody talks about, was there an aura of disappointment getting a silver?
Yeah, there was.
I mean, that's kind of heartbreaking to hear
My
that.
BUD/S instructors told me I was first loser.
I'd expect nothing less from
first loser.
SEAL cadre.
You know, I get that all the time. You know, every time that I don't win something to this day.
Like, oh, you're used to it.
Yeah, fuck yeah. Listen, dude, Mr. Second Place. You're good at that shit. And so that's fine. Whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's all good fun. And the people that talk the most shit to me are like the ones that I like the most, right?
Yeah.
And like vice versa. The ones I talk the most shit to are the ones I like the most. It's a weird thing that I guess, you know, I think is sort of like sports team oriented. And so yeah, there is a disappointment to that. I don't know how founded or unfounded it is, but like you just condition your mind to be able to, it's just like mentally rehearsing for a dive or something like that. You position yourself where like you are going to achieve, you know, mission success. And in this case, mission success is a gold medal, and like mission failure is not like, you know, is less than that.
Yeah.
And so you're setting yourself up for defeat mentally by that being the mentality. You are, right? Even because you view anything less than that as a failure. Obviously, in hindsight, I don't. Like, I'm very proud of it and very happy that I had the opportunity. But at the time, yeah, it's like bittersweet for sure in the immediate aftermath.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. What do you have your medals like on display at home?
Yeah, it's funny. I completely lost track of them for a while, which is an embarrassing to say. They're at my parents' house, then they're at my in-laws' house. Now I have them. They're not in display. But actually, I don't have a shadow box yet either, and I don't have my medals displayed. So that's the two things that I'm actually wanting to do in the next few months is like find a good place to put those up and to get my shadow box made, because I don't have that made either.
Do you ever look at them?
No.
Never?
Never.
Is it something you think about?
No, never.
Never, really?
Never.
What, is it just because of everything, how long it's been and everything you've done since then, or what?
Like we were talking about before the show, man, I'm just fucking busy. Like I don't got time to think. Like, dude, like I don't got time to think.
Yeah.
Like I wake up, I got 3 kids, I get my workout in, it's like my me time. Then it's like getting all them squared away for school or camp or whatever it is in the summertime. Get to work, crank on work, come home, get the kids squared away. It's like I have zero time to reflect and be like, man, the Olympics were cool. This is it, man. This is it. And I got some more stories too on it, but like this is like the extent of it. And it was a really unique time. And it's funny, like even the other day, last week, I was getting texted from some of my old swimming buddies, like, oh, your American record's probably gonna get broken tonight. I'm like, I hope it is. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, why are people saying the American record's gonna get broken tonight? Turns out they're in the middle of nationals. I didn't even remember or think about it.
Yeah.
And got close. My U.S. Open record got broken, which I'm really happy because it's been too long. Got broken, but not the American. So I think that'll get broken this summer if I was to bet on it.
Yeah. With the same team, I guess, component, is there anything that would surprise people about the other swimmers? I mean, the big names, Ryan Lochte and Michael Phelps. I mean, obviously you guys are pretty close. You know each other well. How are those guys in person? Like, were there any riffs or
no riffs? There's always a little bit of drama here and there, but nothing that's like crazy, right?
There's no secrets about either of them that you could tell.
No, unfortunately, nothing that'd be fun, anyways. You know, I think everyone works really hard, but I think there's a huge talent aspect of it too, and that's something that I think goes with like any sport, and no person who's good at what they do is ever just going to say, I'm just sort of naturally pretty good at this.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to say, I work the hardest. Everyone. That's what everyone says. And that's what everyone sort of believes. I think one of the biggest surprises to me, just thinking about my teammates, is some people were what I would describe sort of like lazy. And not those guys, but just in general. Like some people were just sort of lazy, and they still pulled off, and undisciplined, and still pulled off Olympic championships.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think there's so much to just talent that people don't really talk about as it relates to sport. Everyone wants to talk about Kobe being great because of how much time and effort he put in, or Jordan, or whoever, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing to talk about. These people are also just naturally gifted. It's like a yes and.
Right.
And interestingly, I think that talent actually, it's the inverse of what most people think. I think talent and raw, horsepower takes you further than hard work at that level.
Yeah.
It's not like you can't be lazy necessarily, but on a relative basis to like some other folks, I think it's pretty clear who puts in more time and effort and whatever, and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always mean that you're going to do better just because you work harder.
Yeah, I see that in dogs. Maybe
Yeah, I'm
strangely
sure
or not.
you do. It's probably the best case of this. You probably have, anyways, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, genetics, to me, you hear the argument nature or nurture, nature versus nurture, and it's not a versus, it's a both.
Yep.
And the analogy I like to use is genetics is the amp. Like take a stereo system, if you've got a 50-watt amp, right, that's what your genetic components are. And so the max output that amp is ever going to put out is 50 watts.
Yeah.
So if you're competing against a 200-watt amp, even if the 200-watt amp is working at half hard work speed, it's still double of what,
Totally.
and so, I see that a lot in dogs because people think that you can out-train genetics, and you can't. It's like the half joking comment you made, like, hey, can your dog food make my French bulldog something? It's not, and no, it can't. But, because again, military and police at a really high level is kind of the same equivalent. Like you're talking about professional athletes at the genetic and coaching, training, all these things kind of all funneled together at the very tip of the spear, industry-wise. They're doing the most incredible things at the highest level, for their entire careers. And if that dog doesn't have what it takes, like I don't give a fuck how good of a trainer you are, or if you feed team dog, or whatever, like there's no amount of picking up slack that if their genetic cap is only at a certain level that you can circumvent.
Totally.
That's just the way it is, and so I can see a lot of parallels there. What else would you share about the Olympic experience that I haven't asked you, or that you think is relevant and cool?
I think it was amazing. My second one being in Beijing, especially sort of like now at the intersection of my work and sort of like geopolitical tensions, Beijing, China, broadly being sort of like our largest competitor / threat on a world stage. And back then, nobody even talking about it or thinking about it. And it was pretty sort of like evident then the amount of precision, the amount of capital, the amount of structure they put behind making sure that games was flawless. Yeah. And I remember landing in Beijing, and the smog was so thick and shitty that I was looking out the window. I wonder how close we are to the ground. And the wheels touched down on like the 747 or whatever it was. And I'm like, holy shit, like I could barely see the ground from that high of a seat off the ground because the smog was so thick. 2 days later, like all the factories were shut down, all the whatever, and it was clean, beautiful, clear the rest of the time. Wow. And they did that sort of like on an orchestrated basis, obviously. It's not the way it always is. They did it so that it looks pristine in the world eyes. Pretty remarkable to see. And, my second games actually has a lot of intersection of like, my timeline and the story of how I got into the teams.
Was there a component or an element of cheating, catching people cheating? Like, did you see any of that? Like,
it's a complicated topic because everybody takes some supplements to a certain extent, and sometimes some of those supplements, to like the dog food analogy, are manufactured at like a co-packer or whatever it's called, and they do other things too. And drug testing is very rigorous. So for me, my experience was I had to fill out a sheet every quarter, I believe, of where I was going to be every single day for that quarter. And I'd be randomly drug tested, blood and urine. People just show up.
Yeah.
And if you weren't there, they'd call you and you had to be there within an hour. And so if you were out of that range, you got a dink. And if you had like 3 strikes where they showed up and you weren't there, you'd get banned for like a year because the presumption is that you're fucking around and cheating.
Yeah.
So it's pretty rigorous. It's pretty hard to cheat, I would guess, even if you wanted to. We always had our suspicions about the Chinese, always had our suspicions about the Russians, rightfully earned historically. These fuckers cheat. So that's something that I think was pretty clear. As far as Americans cheating, I'm not aware of it. But I do know Americans that got banned where retroactively their name has been cleared because it's complicated because they were taking some creatine or whatever it was and there was some trace elements of something in there. Right. Or they fucked up and they took in college like Adderall for a test or something like that.
Yeah.
Guess what? That's a banned substance.
Yeah.
Like your ass is banned. And so I have some, I guess, tolerance for mistakes in that regard because I know many of those people and I'd be very surprised if they were stupid enough to take Adderall to improve their pool performance. I guess anything's possible. And also things like Sudafed, you got to stuff your nose. You have a limit to even the over-the-counter drugs that you can take to treat a symptom. And I have guys who pissed positive for pseudoephedrine or whatever it is, which is like a stimulant, but actually it just clears up your nose, right? If you got a cold. Yeah. And so there's a lot to keep track of. It's pretty difficult. But numerous times, I'd have people show up and it's just and they watch you. They take your blood and they're watching you urinate, very up close and personal. Yeah. The stage fright's real. I don't know if you have somebody just literally zoned in.
Well, it's like boot camp. When you show up at boot camp, it's the same thing.
No, dude, this is they're zoned in, man. I've never had something like this, any other way. They're inspecting, making sure, because you have to take your pants all the way down to your ankles, and their job is to show up and watch people pee.
Yeah. Man, how do I get that job?
I mean, listen, I got some hookups. I know some guys. I know some weird team guys who'd love that job. Yeah. But it's an awkward experience. So it's funny, just sitting around for 30 minutes. I gotta pee, but I got stage fright, man, because somebody's gonna be literally watching me go.
Do they do that at the games too?
Yeah, dude.
They're testing constantly.
Yeah. There's multiple. I think it's probably changed. We have WADA is the World Anti-Doping Agency, and then USADA, U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. So we have the U.S. and then the world governing body. Where I think there's been a lot of controversy over the time is when some Chinese competitors, they have the Chinese version of it, and you can imagine they're corrupt as shit. Yeah. They don't appropriately report things to WADA, and then it gets found out over time. Yeah. And it's just then everybody gets labeled as being a cheat over there, and I think many of them are. So works for me.
I do wonder, even within those organizations, if you're dealing with state-sponsored, entities the size of China, where there's corruption payouts,
totally
threats. Who's keeping the governing bodies honest from being either bribed or whatever, And you look at, say, the Tour de France. Blood doping, how prevalent is that, at the games, right before a race, now they get a blood transfusion or something with Spider-Man blood or some shit. And I don't know.
I'm sure it happens, and a bunch of my team guy buddies are dude, level with me, Larsen. You for sure know guys that are doing that. I'm either they were that good and that covert, or no, I don't. And so I don't know. I know the mistakes. A couple folks that actually couldn't go to the Olympics actually. And I believe there are mistakes given the investigation that happened subsequently. But it's sort of too late to clear your name. And it's the same thing. An accident is the same thing as doing it on purpose, because you think about it, either way, you have the stimulant in your body. So
you know what you were doing.
Yeah, or even if you didn't know what you're doing, you're still performance enhanced by the fact that you have an illegal substance in your body, even if it was a mistake. So it's not like they're going to say, oh, it's cool, it was a mistake, you got a stimulant in your body, you can compete. Like, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So it's a weird situation. But I think that now there's been much more, clean eating, clean supplements, really, all the way down the supply chain into manufacturing has made it much better. So I think guys I haven't heard any of the instances recently, but I'm also not as in tune as I used to be.
Yeah. All right. So the Olympic stuff is fascinating. Obviously, we've spent quite a bit of time on it. It's just there's, if you think about how rare it is to be an Olympic medalist, like that's a pretty elite globally. That's a pretty elite fucking category of individual. But I am real curious because being a SEAL team member is equally rare. To have done both is excruciatingly rare. But I am curious, what was the plan, the mentality, and kind of the catalyst that made you go from being at that level of athletics to saying, you know what, I'm going to go be a fucking knuckle dragger for a while and get my hands dirty for Uncle Sam.
Probably a lot. I've heard a lot of the guests that you've had on that are team guys, and like, when was the first time you've heard of like what the SEALs were and all that stuff? I don't know how I got it or why my parents got it for me, but I got a book called Weapons of the Navy SEALs.
Really?
When I was a kid. Must have been early 90s that I got that. Had dudes coming out like on their Draeger and with their M4s or whatever they had at the time, and for whatever reason, I had that as a kid, and I always had this affinity towards, the service and the military. My dad was in the Army back when they still, I believe, had a draft. He was post Korea, pre-Vietnam, deployed over to Europe, where we were worried about Soviet encroachment from Eastern Germany and all that stuff. So he was never, a combat veteran, but an Army veteran. I don't think that really made the decision for me necessarily, but I always had this positive affinity towards it. And just like many other folks, like, the SEAL reputation of like it's the hardest military training out there, I was drawn towards that. Wanted to find, that whole adage, the only easy day was yesterday. I was drawn towards that. It was like my bug light, even when I was a kid. And then after my first Olympics, I sort of had a resurgence of that childhood dream of joining the Navy to be a Navy SEAL. And started investigating it more, met some people that were in the teams. People were very gracious with their time to help me learn more about the brotherhood and the community and what it was like to go through BUDS and ultimately be a part of the team. Obviously, this is post 9/11, so is when, like, if you're going to sign up, you're almost guaranteed to go into combat because we had essentially two theaters, maybe a global theater, frankly, but two primary theaters, Iraq and Afghanistan. Had some buddies of mine from high school, joined the Marines and all that stuff, and I felt if I was fortunate enough to go from being a small town kid to representing my country on the playing field, that I owed my country a debt of gratitude in the form of public service. And if I had the physical and mental tenacity to make it through, that I should sign up and do that when my country needed me in a time of war. So all those things coincided, spent a lot of time thinking about it, had some people that similar to my younger years in swimming, told me that my ambitions were too high, and I sort of said, fuck you. I had some, pseudo mentors of mine that told me that by joining the military, I was throwing my life away. Wow. And that, probably wasn't going to come home and all those kinds of things. They didn't have a history in it. They were elites from LA. And I think that was another catalyst. Well, like, I'm going to do it. And so going into the 2008 games, I was 95% sure that was going to be my last games. I was going to be done. I was going to retire after that. And that I was going to, join the Navy with the goal of being a Navy SEAL. Hadn't talked to anybody officially about doing that. But interestingly, at the 2008 games, President Bush was there. And he was watching Team USA, and he was watching my events on the day one of swimming in the finals. And I earned the bronze medal in the 400 freestyle. And after the event, not only are you on the awards stadium, your podium, you get your medal, and you typically get like a stuffy animal. I don't know why they do that. Some Chinese stuffy animal I don't even know where that's at. I probably got rid of it. And a bouquet of flowers. And at the time, I didn't have a girlfriend, a spouse, or anything like that. Although my now wife was there watching her cousin, who, we can get into that in a minute. She's a very accomplished Olympian. She's a modern day Annie Oakley in trap and ski. Damn, Kim Rohde. Yeah, she's 6-time straight Olympic medalist. She's a shooting hero. And so, but I hadn't convinced her to date me yet. But who was there was the First Lady, Laura Bush, and President Bush was there as well. And so after that, the athletes paraded around the pool, and I climbed up the athlete bleachers to where the president was sitting and the First Lady, and I waved for the First Lady, Laura Bush, to come down because I was going to give her my flowers. Apparently, I was not super clear on who I was waiting for, and President George W. Bush walked down.
So you gave him the flowers.
No, I didn't. He shook my hand and said, "Hey, you did America proud. Thank you for representing our country and all this stuff." And I said, "I appreciate that, sir, but I was actually not waving for you. I was waving for your wife. I want to give these to her." And I gave her my bouquet of flowers, and thanked her for coming, as sort of like the mom of America to support all of us. And she got choked up, and I was like, it's something that was not pre-planned. You never really know if you're going to get a medal and all that stuff. And a lot of people just throw their bouquet into the stands. But I did that. And how this intersects with the SEAL team story is the president came back to spend time with us American athletes, with him, President Bush Sr., with Laura, and they were talking to us athletes. And he said, what are you going to do next? You going to go represent our country again? I'm like, yes, sir, but I want to do it in a different way. I'm going to be a Navy SEAL. And at that point, when you make a commitment to the president, it's like, all right, this went from 95% to we're fucking going. And that's the story of how that happened.
That is so cool.
There's crazy other stories about that, where I was, invited to the White House to spend time with President Bush a couple times thereafter, out of just that single incident of generosity, I guess, or of just thoughtfulness that I wasn't really premeditated. It just sort of happened. And it's something that it's really remarkable.
What a cool fucking story, man. That is awesome.
Thank you.
Did he follow up or play any role in helping accommodate, a slot or anything like that?
Well, it's funny now that you bring it up. So I went back. I'm like, all right, I'm training to be a Navy SEAL. So I'm at my apartment in LA in Manhattan Beach, training, doing beach runs, carrying rocks, whatever, reading. What's his name? Stu Smith's 20 Weeks to Buds or whatever it's called.
He's still going.
Yeah, it's still going. So read that, tried to get all my times. I'm like, all right, I'm doing everything it says in the book. I'm going to the recruiting office and all this stuff. I'm working through this. I get a letter in the mail. It's a handwritten one-page letter, and the return address says, the White House. And I'm like, I better open this. Wonder what this says. Open it, handwritten from the president. It says, the next time you're in D.C., call this number. I'd love to see you.
Wow.
And I'm just like, what the fuck? Who would have thought? And I'm obviously not in D.C., but I called the number. Nice Southern receptionist, because he's from Texas. A lot of people from down here in Texas who are with the administration. Oh, hi, Larsen. Been waiting to hear from you. Thank you for calling. The president actually has has an availability at 9 a.m. on Thursday. Can you meet him at the White House? I'm like, yeah, I'll be there. And so booked my flight, flew out, and another one of those crazy experiences. One of two times this happened where I showed up and said, checking in, I forget which gate it is, hey, I've got a 9 a.m. with the president. Sort of half thinking that they're going to be turn you away, all the Secret Service, their guns, and who's going to let this knuckle dragger in here to meet with the president. Sure enough, went in and spent almost an hour with him in the Oval.
Wow.
And, that's when he brought up, hey, you still doing the SEALs? I'm like, yes, I am. Putting in my package. He's like, hey, you need a letter of recommendation. I'm like, sir, I think I'm already going to have a target on my back from the instructors. The last thing I need is a letter from you. I appreciate it, but please do not say anything to anybody. I got it. Hopefully.
Fuck, I'd have taken it.
Yeah, maybe. But I figured that it was you know what it's like. You're an instructor. Everyone's looking for anything to extract out of you. The last thing I need is a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that one would have been worth it though.
It might have been. It might have been.
But, man, that's so cool. So from that point, when you met with him until you actually got your package in, were accepted, and went through the whole process, how much time expired between that?
Not that much. So the Olympics were, I think, August of 2008. Started basically getting ready thereafter. LA recruiting depot, Los Angeles recruiting depot for the Navy. Went in there and had that whole story like, hey, all right, son, what do you want to be in the Navy? Oh, you want to be an officer? All right, you got your college degree. Okay, you can put in an OCS package, which was what I did. All right, son, like fill out these 6 things that you want to do in the Navy. You could be, surface warfare officer, submarine officer. You could be an aviator. You could, be in special operations. You can, NSW. And I wrote Navy SEAL for all 6. And whoever the nice, I don't know if he was nice, but the gentleman who was like the senior chief recruiter is like, sorry, son, that's not how it works. You got to write 6. And I said, there's only one thing I want to do. I only want to be a Navy SEAL, nothing else. That's all I want on this thing. And so fortunately, he worked a lot with me. And the recruiters, I think, by and large, do a great job getting the right guys into the right places where they can make a difference and make an impact in the broader military. And so he worked with me. Worked with me on my PT scores, making sure I got my pull-ups where they need to be. Worked with me on my package, making
Get
sure
your swim time down a little bit.
Yeah, that was what I remember. They're like in the swim time. They're like, who the fuck is this kid? Had like the pre-buds or whatever. You have like the SEAL mentors, right? You get together and like you have somebody that's an old frog man there putting dudes through PT that's like gotten out. And you got like, whatever, a couple dozen guys getting some PT and stuff like that at a pool deck and doing flutter kicks and all that. So I did all that. And fortunately, got in my package, and then I got a phone call. It was April Fool's Day of 2009. And they're like, hey, this is the United States Navy, whoever it was, OCS, need you to report like next Monday, Newport, Rhode Island. Check it in to OCS. I thought it was a buddy fucking with me, right? Because it's like April Fool's Day, this is sort of the thing that we would do, like somebody, like, and it's like a whatever random number, unknown block caller. No, I was serious, like be there. It's like, well, I got a lease to break, got all these things, but just like the Navy does, it started before even joining that this is like the hurry up and wait. Hadn't heard anything for months, had no idea what was going on. And then all of a sudden you got, 5 days to check in.
Yeah. Man, that's crazy. So you went straight in and
straight into OCS. I think I was. What was it? I forget how I think 2109. I guess that means probably the 21st class for OCS. Or I'm guessing of 09 of OCS maybe. And yeah, I went through OCS.
Did you know right away that you had a bud slot? Like
you get the designator. But I had some surgeries, so. A few things I was worried about in my package, like I was passing all the test scores, but the Navy, they don't, they can put some traps in front of you that aren't real traps. I mean, probably similar to like your medical retirement. I was worried about like not medically being capable in their eyes. I knew I was fine, but I had my ACL done in college and it was fine. I was doing everything just fine. It was like 7 years prior. So I was a little worried about that, but yeah, I got, my 1130 designation that had the opportunity to go to BUDS. And so went through all the medical checks and all that stuff in OCS, and then with follow-on orders to go down to
when you showed up, expectation versus reality. This is something you've been thinking about for a number of years. Was it what you what you thought it would be cracked up to be, or did anything kind of surprise you?
Yeah, I mean you can read all you want about any topic out there, even right now in like our current line of work or whatever, until you actually go through it and you do it, it's just a different animal, right? Yeah. You can read all you want about, training dogs until you start training dogs. Like, what do you really know about it? Right. You sort of know a little bit. So there is enough material out there from all these guys, Bud's Prep and, all the books and the, 234 Discovery Channel show and all that stuff. And so I think knew a lot about what was in store. Knew the general progression of what Hell Week would be, like when Steel Pier was going to be and all that stuff, or at least that it was going to happen. Maybe not when it's going to happen, but that it was going to happen. So, but going through it's a different animal. Like you get there and you get assigned to a class. They have like 30 people in the class. You don't realize how many 230 people are until you're all, running 4 abreast to the chow hall and you're doing this zigzag accordion with that many people. It's a lot of fucking people. Yeah. And it's definitely an experience.
Yeah, you don't realize how many people that is until you're all nut to butt under
totally, man.
Station, getting ready to get in the pool. Yeah. You were the class OIC, right?
I was, yeah. That happened in Hell Week because I think our first OIC quit.
Which is rare.
Which is rare.
Yeah.
And then our second one hyped out, and they're like, Jensen, you. And I'm like, I'm trying to be the gray man. Yeah. It's the deal. I'm trying to like be good enough, but not so good that I attract attention. But on the first, beach run of Indoc, like that didn't work because they're like immediately on the bullhorn, hey, Navy SEAL, raise your hand. I'm just like, fuck. Hoo-yah, yo, instructor, right? It's not like multiple hands are going up, or hey, Olympian, raise your hand. And it's like, ah, shit, like, hoo-yah, here I am. And so get identified pretty quickly in that. And so I guess me being the gray man sort of like went out the window pretty quickly, like day one of Indoc. And then, it was anointed begrudgingly OIC by the cadre during Hell Week.
Yeah, that's a job even back then. I mean, granted, I was also the youngest guy in my class.
Yeah. How old were you?
I was 18.
Oh, shit. Yeah, we had a couple of those guys.
Yeah. And so,
I don't know how they did it, man.
I think some of it is where I would say naivete actually plays to your advantage a little bit. It's like you kind of don't even know what you don't know. You know, so I do think that there's a component that benefits you a little bit there. Also, just the vitality of being 18 and being able to just ruin your fucking body and bounce back the next day better than you can even at 25. But I remember seeing our OIC and just thinking like, oh my God, I'm glad I'm not him.
Yeah.
Like that just seems like the worst fucking spot to be in as a bud student. Any huge hiccups as the OIC?
Not really. I mean, I think, as an officer going into it, I guess sort of like some of the wisdom that I got from people that had done that, who were prior officers, or even from the senior enlisted, the chiefs. I lived next door to a SEAL chief who was retired, who would, teach us the whole like, meal to meal and getting through all these evolutions and stuff like that. Try not to think too big of a picture because that's when you sort of like psych yourself out. All those normal things. But I think the key lesson that I learned from that is that I actually think the officers have an easier job.
Really?
I do. And at least in my experience. And I think that's not because it's like they get to do less. They are arguably made to do more in my case because they're responsible. But I think that what I learned is if you're thinking about the well-being of the guys and thinking of the well-being of the class, you don't have the time in your mind to think about like your own suck as much and your own misery. Yeah. You don't have the time to be like a swimmer that I was, where you're stuck thinking about your own problems and your own discomfort. Your mentality is completely taken up by making sure that, like, if you're in charge of a boat crew, that's one thing. Like, making sure boat crew is doing the best they can and like is well optimized. And in terms of the class, the whole class is doing the best they can and rising to the occasion. And so I think in that regard, mentally it's easier just because you don't have the mind space to think as much about how much you hurt. You still think about it, right? You can't avoid it. Like, you're still hurting, but I think it's sort of like pushed to the side a little bit. It's probably similar to being like on an operation, right? Like, you don't have time to think about like your own discomfort because you're thinking about everything else. Even if like afterwards you're just like, fuck, like I'm wiped, or that hurt, or I twisted my ankle, or whatever it is. You just don't have time to think about it because you're thinking about everything else that's going on.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting component I certainly hadn't thought of, but it absolutely makes sense. Obviously, you didn't have any trouble with the time swims. Did you break any records?
No. I still get shit for not making watermans, right? But our second phase instructor, what was his name? So I probably should leave names off it anyways. But it was actually a day where the swim almost got canked because like the sea state was pretty rough. And I'm like, all right, I'm still gonna get waterman on like the fucking worst sea state day. And didn't get it. And so like since then, everybody that comes through, or when I have had buddies that have been assigned to second phase, they take a picture of it and are like, your name's not up here. You're like fucking Olympian, like American record holder, and you can't make this. You're weak. You suck. I'm like, listen. But the second I try and explain it, you know how it goes.
Sure,
it doesn't. The worst thing you could do ever.
You could have got bit by a shark and it wouldn't fucking
doesn't matter. The second you try and caveat anything to anybody is the second they make it even worse on you. So I'm just like, you know what? Check. You're right. Like, I'm just awful. I suck. It is what it is. And it just takes the wind out of their sails. So just embrace it.
Did they end up putting these shittiest swimmers with you to try to carry them through? And
a couple times. Like, there's some guys, some good dudes, right, that are just like, weak swimmers, right? It's like, hey, this dude like needs some help to sort of like get through. Like, there's never like they never said like, hey, if you fail, you're fucked. Like, but I think there's sort of a little bit of an understanding that like, hey, this is like a really good dude that's just not like the best swimmer. He crushes everything, but he's like, we can swim, you can go pace him, right?
Sure.
And so like I definitely did that.
Yeah. So obviously the swims were no problem, but did you find the amount of time that you spent in the water growing up and competing played a role in comfortability in the water for drown proofing, for pool comp,
100%.
And one thing that I will say challenged me, I did pass it the first time, but I mean, I know it's a motherfucker for everybody, but is the treading with your hands out with the twin 80s, did you crush that?
Yeah,
No
I crushed
problem?
that pretty good.
Yeah.
I was lucky on that.
But even pool comp, like, was not really any problem.
I mean, it's fucking hard. Don't get me wrong. Like, I was lucky. I passed the first time. I'm surprised they didn't fuck with me. You know how it goes, and just fail me just because I'm the Olympian, right? And those things definitely happened. But in that case, I did, and I skated through, and they made they passed me for whatever reason. Maybe I did a good job or not. But yeah, the water evolutions. It's not easy because it compounds, right? It's like throughout the week, like, in isolation, any of these swims or these water evolutions weren't that big of a deal for me, but you compound it with like, the log PT and the boats on heads and the O course. Like, I was Mrs. O course, right? I was Mrs. O course in, I think it was second or third phase, like ran the risk of being rolled because I think I failed once. And I think you had 3 shots for us per evolution. And so I had like the slowest time in the class. They said, come to find out, one of my buddies who was like the PT officer or whatever, the guy who did all the things, like I actually wasn't the worst. There was a 4-0 who was worse than me, but still he wasn't an American, so I got to wear Mrs. O course.
Yeah. That's fucking great. I mean, pool comp is difficult, but it is also so much different. I mean, that's not swimming.
No.
Obviously, there's the biggest part of that is just being comfortable, being uncomfortable underwater. Yeah. But it's neat to see, that translation, I guess, between the amount of time you spend and it at least helping in that regard. Any other stories or things from buds that stand out as being super memorable for you?
I mean, definitely becoming class OIC when I didn't ever want it was one of them. I wouldn't. In hindsight, I'd wish that on people, but at the time, I would never wish that on my enemy.
Right.
Like, it's just, you're a new guy, and you're coming into this, you're totally unfamiliar with this. I think going through buds in hindsight is probably one of the best times I've had in my entire life.
Same here.
My entire life.
Yeah.
The camaraderie, the shared experience, all of that stuff, and it's really good in a platoon as well. But there's something about just like the purity of buds and like the sort of like innocence of like what we're all getting into. The buds instructors, I think, were just legends in our eyes, right?
Yeah.
Combat, hardened dudes, decorated more than I ever was, and who just brave dudes who inspired us to take the fight to the enemy, and who actually were pretty outspoken about the fact that, like, we did join in a time of war.
Yeah.
And I think that's a uniqueness about our generation. I mean, who would have thought? Like, we joined 8+ years into the conflict, like our guys.
Yeah.
And who would have thought it would have gone on for another like 10 after that? Everyone was worried we were going to miss it and like not get a chance and all that stuff. And I think now the guys getting in, like they arguably might not, but you just never know how things are going to change. Yeah. But I think for our era, we joined in a time where like you could almost bet your bottom dollar you were going somewhere.
Agreed. I mean, it was something that I know I remember both being inspired by and impressed with, and also communicating to the students at a certain point. I mean, not on day one.
Totally not. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to me, that says a lot. I mean, I joined pre 9/11, which, to me, there was also a neat element to that, in that I spent 4 years on a full workup and deployment prior to 9/11, and then afterwards as well. So seeing that kind of paradigm shift within the community was kind of neat to be able to see both sides too.
I imagine it was. I mean, what an experience. But I mean, I can't speak for everyone who joined, but I mean, when you have like the seriousness of our Medal of Honor recipients, and like I had those posted on my wall pre-joining, like reading those citations of Mike Murphy, Mike Mansour, and those guys, like, and it's just like, this is what I'm signing up for. Yeah. Like, I want to be a part of this brotherhood, and these are the guys who are like who sacrificed their life for their brothers and for their country. And like, that is something that I think is so deep and powerful that I don't know, it's just hard to put into words.
Yeah.
And to be, fortunate to be, a part of the brotherhood, for a short period of time in my case, is just, it's more important to me than having been an Olympian. Like my trident means more to me today than my Olympic medals, for sure.
Yeah, man, that's fucking awesome. It's really, really cool the way that you put it, and to hear that. I mean, it's fascinating. It's interesting you mentioned Mike Mansour. I remember he was the first student that I had put through training that was killed in action.
Really?
And kind of similarly, there was this very stark contrast of emotion that I felt attending his funeral than any of the guys that were my teammates that had been killed in action. Yeah. And I don't know if it was, some sort of
why is that
pseudo-paternal kind of thing of feeling like, this is the next generation that we're putting through training. And it felt more like a paternal thing, I guess. I don't know how else to explain it. Like that hit me harder, honestly, even though I didn't know him that well. I remember him, but it was just, man, it was such a gut punch. And I think, at that time, the end of 2006 in Iraq was kind of the height of that entire war as well, where it was the gnarliest in the triangle there, Ramadi, Fallujah, and Baghdad, and it just, the circumstances with which he died and the bravery and heroism that he displayed in his death, all those things combined, was just such an emotional experience. And to this day, I can't hear "Say Hello to Heaven" by Temple of the Dog. That was played during this photo and video montage towards the end of his funeral. Like I can't listen to that song. Yep. It's still, will get me choked up, and I just end up fucking changing it or turning it off or whatever. Yep. But again, I'm glad you shared that. It's powerful. So you go through BUD/S, you end up at Team 5. Yep. Was checking in, did you catch a bunch of shit? Because there's this element of you're the Olympian, that follows you everywhere.
It does.
Was that something that was highlighted when you checked in? Or
it's something that just everywhere you go, right?
Yeah.
Something you wish you could sort of erase. As crazy as it sounds, I wish that it wasn't something that followed me then.
Yeah.
Because I just wanted to earn my spot and be a normal guy, you know? And so, but, I don't think anyone, who knows, you'd have to ask them. I don't think anyone truly thought any differently of me because of it in a negative way. But it's something that I would have preferred not to address. But as people address it, you just got to embrace it, right?
Yeah.
Checking the normal sort of new guy stuff. A little bit of hazing and all that stuff. But we had quite a few new guys. I think we had, 7 or 8 or so in our platoon. So not quite half the platoon, but a big chunk of them, and many of which were in my BUD/S class. So knew them pretty well.
Yeah.
But, obviously, our LPO was, a Silver Star recipient and all this stuff.
Can you say his name, or you'd rather not?
I'd rather not.
Yeah,
just,
okay.
Didn't ask him. I haven't talked to him in years. So,
yeah, I gotcha.
But, Silver Star recipient and all this stuff. So we had the opportunity to learn from dudes who were, been in the shit.
Yeah.
And we got, our OIC did a great job of advocating for our platoon to get assigned to, our troop broadly, but our platoon specifically to a certain mission set in Afghanistan, which, we fortunately got. Which was the commando mission out of Kandahar at the time, where we'd work with their version of SOF effectively to go out and do some village clearances and support the village stability operations that were going on at that time of the conflict. So there'd be basically SF guys embedded in a bunch of villages around in the Kandahar region. And, if they needed to be plussed up or needed some, extra muscle to go through and do a village clearance or to go, do an operation, we'd sort of do that. So it was a pretty cushy deployment in that regard, that we were fortunate that we had a chow hall, ice cream, whatever, all that stuff. And we'd, surge out for, a few days or a week or whatever it is to go plus up those guys, which were primarily the ODAs. And so, it's surprising to me in hindsight that it was as kinetic as it was at the time. What was fucking crazy about it is obviously this and the listeners as well, the largest loss of life that we've had in our community has been through rotary wing shoot downs, right? Yeah. And literally I was on pre-deployment leave, and I just proposed to my now wife. We've been married for, since 2013 when I got back. So we've been married, almost 12 years coming up here. Proposed, and we're in Napa and all this stuff. And I got a text from I think it was our OIC saying, the guys we were leaving just got helicopter shot down. Like, don't know how many guys we lost, but looks like everybody on board. And so it was, Warson and Feeks, those were the team guys on that one. Obviously lost the whole helicopter, and that's like where we're going 2 weeks later. And so it's just like, fuck, this is about to get real. And you think about trying to be as strong as you can as a husband to be and assure everyone it's going to be okay when you don't know if it's going to be okay, right? And so that's, I think, when it got really real, because we're doing starting to do some turnover with them and starting to communicate a little bit more with them and what's going on. And they just lost, I think it was, had to be 7 or 8 guys total in terms of the pilots, the air crew, et cetera. It's just not fucking good. So that's what we stepped into, a couple weeks later, was just guys really, grappling with that. And that deployment also that we relieved was when Crenshaw got blown up and all that. So we went, that mission, or that mission was the same mission we were doing. So we relieved those guys. And so, yeah, that was, I think, in hindsight, even more so than any of the things that we went through. That was a heavy time, at least for me, because I'm about to get married, and trying to say that all this is going to be fine, and you never really know.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a heavy, super heavy way to start your first deployment. You were the assistant officer in charge of the first one. During that Afghanistan deployment, obviously on the heels of a helicopter being shot down and some pretty heavy casualties from IEDs, was the op tempo and pace operationally for you guys such that you were busy operationally and you got into some decent?
We were pretty busy throughout the entire time, but we showed up, I think it was September time frame, and we were there over the winter into the spring, right? And so at that point in time, the spring offensive was the busiest fighting season, at least down in our region. So if I remember correctly, the winter was a little bit quiet in terms of the things that we did, but we still were active, always looking for work, right? That's what, you train your dogs, you train a team guy, you're out, look for work, right? Look for work. And so that's something that we were doing. So it was busier, I think, right when we got there, but obviously I was a new guy, and we were new stepping into theater, so it took us a little bit to get our bearings. But yeah, it was pretty active. Probably one of the more active at the time, aside from the guys who were in Helmand, probably. Right. But Helmand was just that was our sister platoon. That was just, but unfortunately probably more IED heavy. And we had our share of that too. I can't remember the area we went to, but our EOD guys were we were basically told that we're going to go do this operation in this area. And this is literally the most IED infested area in the world. And our EOD guys were this is off the charts, bad to patrol through this. And yeah, we, one of our partners, lost his legs on that op. Our medic did a great job, getting him stabilized and on the helo and out of there. But it was, we sort of knew what we were getting ourselves into. And I don't know, in your deployments, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this too. Being a frogman and being in the SEAL teams, or just probably in the infantry broadly, I think everyone is probably pretty comfortable with their training and getting in a gunfight and knowing how to shoot, move, communicate, and take the fight to the enemy. It's never easy, but I think that's what we're trained to do. The IED threat neutered our ability to maneuver. You literally couldn't maneuver for the rightful risk of losing life and limb if you step off your Ranger file.
Right.
That fucking sucks.
Yeah, it just, I think speaks to the adaptability of the enemy, in that they're clearly woefully outclassed from a conventional standpoint, from an air asset standpoint, from a technology, satellite, drones, et cetera.
Yep.
So, they figured out a way to still throw a wrench in our fucking gears to an enormous degree for a long time, and still do. I do think, and we'll get into this here in a little bit, the newer technology of drones, mini drones, the less expensive drones, et cetera, in mass, are further kind of evolving and changing the game as it relates to warfare. But yeah, I mean, that was the big ticket item for a long time. And there was a study done in the late 2000s called JIATO. I don't know if you're familiar with that. The Joint IED
Defeat organization.
Yeah. You know, and they spent several $1 billion over a several-year period trying to, you know, come up with the most effective means of defeating IEDs, or at least mitigating them. And it ended up being the dog was by far the best capability for that, which makes me curious. Did you guys have dogs with you at all?
We did. We had a guy, and then he ended up going home. I think he had a family emergency, then brought in a new dog guy.
Do you remember if they were East or West Coast guys?
West Coast guys.
Yeah. Do you remember the dogs' names?
I don't know.
Because
this is one of those things that was just like, I haven't thought about it forever.
Because this was 2012, 2013.
Nico?
Yeah. No way.
Is that it?
Yeah.
I had to search my memory for a second here.
First name's Taylor.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. What year was that? Do you remember?
12.
Yeah. Dude, that's so wild that you said that. So Nico was what I would call the full circle dog in my career, in that he was a dog that myself and the other trainer, we sourced from Europe, put through his first handler course with the multi-purpose canine program. He did a number of deployments after that, and then was retired, and he came to the Warrior Dog Foundation for several years. And then his last handler, Taylor Kavanaugh, who's been on this show several years ago, ended up adopting him and had him. So kind of the full service circle operation. But yeah, he ended up.
Surprised I even remembered that.
That's
dude. That's
awesome.
good. I'm proud of myself.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, not blowing smoke or saying it for the sake of the episode. Absolutely one of the best dogs that I've ever had the pleasure of training. You know, it's impossible for me to say a best dog.
Yeah. It's impossible for me to know, because what do I know? Like, I don't see I have no basis of comparison. But I remember everyone was really loved him.
Yeah, I mean he was a top shelf, top tier dog for sure. I mean I could say, you know, there's 5 or 6 dogs that I would all put into a category as the best dogs that I've worked with, and he's absolutely one of them. You know, but man,
guess we were lucky. Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you for enabling us.
Well, I mean, to me it was such an honor to be in that position. But so I guess operationally for you, are there any operations that stand out as being super memorable for either going exceptionally well or ones that were?
I mean, I think you'll never forget your first time getting shot at.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
Can you share that story?
Yeah. I mean, obviously in training we go through it. We have sim rounds. We have whatever blanks and all this stuff, and so. But it's just and obviously we've been in the butts and all that stuff. Yeah. But it just sounds different than I expected. Having rounds incoming, it sounded to me more like the popping of those like packaging material.
Oh yeah,
that's what it sounded like to me, with a little bit of a snap, but like the pop, like from further out. And
to me, it was like a crack of a whip. You know, it was like, but
yeah,
similarly surprising.
It's just like, what's that fucking sound? And it's just like, so like first time getting contacted is when I remember, right? And I still have. Well, maybe I shouldn't say what I've got. If somebody were to have something, one of those rounds that got really close to me, that was pried out of a mud wall by one of our guys, it's like, hey, Larsen, you should keep this. And so I've got it.
That's cool.
And so it's, it's just sort of like, I guess a little bit of a reminder of that experience and whatever. And, we successfully maneuvered on the enemy, and we had a predator overhead. And so we called in some, an airstrike, and we were able to handle that pretty seamlessly. And I think that's how most of those went on. I didn't get to go on every op, just because we had force requirements at the time and ratios of Americans to partner force that we could have, which is something I think a lot of us really struggled with, myself included, for just, we train so well together, to sort of like break that up with people that are not really, the high caliber of training, and a lot of them. it ends up being a lot to manage out there, and so we felt probably like less secure not going just us. We'd much rather just go with us, but that's not what sort of the SOTF at the time, was mandating. And so we had to go with a certain ratio.
Yeah.
I forget what it was, but it ended up being an average, I think, of like half the platoon per op. And so I probably got half the ops that the team did broadly. Got a few GFC ops, which were neat to actually be the guy, in control of like everything and the stack and all that stuff.
Meaning ground force commander.
Correct.
Just for the listener.
Correct.
That's one ding I get sometimes is people are like, I don't even know what the fuck you guys
what
are
you're
talking about.
You guys just nerding out over there. Yeah. So got a few of those, which was neat and a good opportunity. And unfortunately, we didn't come home with everybody. Our TACI W, Chris Pike, on an op that I wasn't on, but I remember being in the talk when we got that we had a bullet wound to the head, unfortunately.
Do you know what mission-wise, did something go wrong, or was it just nature of the beast?
I think it's the nature of the beast, man. I'm sure they did. They always look into these things. There's always a pretty thorough investigation. I don't remember what came after it, and I'm glad we look into it. But at the end of the day, that position got ambushed, right? And I don't think we knew where the fire was coming from. Again, I wasn't there, so I can't speak firsthand to it. I was back in the jock, being radio watch, QRF and all that stuff.
In the rear with the gear, huh?
In the rear with the gear, man. They put me second place again. But yeah, that was shitty, and that was, I think, emotional for all of us, right?
Yeah.
You never want to come home without somebody, and he was awesome. Like, he was just like the epitome of, he wasn't a team guy, but he might as well have been. Like, he was just like the epitome. He looked like Vin Diesel, fucking jacked, best attitude ever, out there helping us DF the chatter and where it was coming from, to help keep us safe and effective. And so, that was tough. Yeah. And I think even though it was tough on us, it goes back to like being, newly engaged too. And like, we're fortunate that we were connected enough where I could have frequent enough calls with back home, but that was something that was also pretty hard where, you don't ever want to, after next of kin and notified and all that stuff, there's like, a comms blackout, right? You're not allowed to talk to anybody about this, right? So when I was able to, like, it was just like, do I even say anything?
Yeah.
Do I say anything to like my mom, or do I say anything to my wife to be? Do I not? I ended up saying something, but like that had to have made it like just, I think the spouses, the wives, the moms, they got to have it harder than the guys in the field. Like, there's no question in my mind, they've got the harder job than the dudes out in the shit. No question to me.
Yeah, I think from an uncertainty standpoint, and that feeling of helplessness is so much more significant, for the families, because to your point, it's like, we're doing what we want to do. You're with your fucking boys, you're, across the fucking globe doing team guy shit, having fun. Yes, it's dangerous, but that's what you signed up for. There's a camaraderie component, like you're blowing off steam. It's fun.
Yeah.
They get stuck with the things that aren't fun, and have to hold the fort down, and just that uncertainty of like never knowing when the phone rings if it's going to be a bad news call or not, and it is tough. I don't think they get enough credit for sure.
They don't. But yeah, I mean, it was an interesting time, man. So that was like what we firsthand experienced. But then, like in a separate area of Afghanistan, one of my buds and SQT classmates, Matt Cantor, got shot. Ramp ceremony. We carried him on. We had a few ramp ceremonies, like obviously with Pike, Cantor, had another one. Like, and that was just like, yeah, it's tough, man. Like carrying your brothers and like loading them up on a C-17 to go home, and that was rough. And then we also had, Commander Price. Yeah. Different circumstance, but that occurred, I think, on Chris. We were on an op. Like, we were like actually going out the door. Like, we're about to load the helos, and like, we got the call and said, hey, like, he's dead, effectively. And so we didn't really have time to like know what happened. We loaded up and went out and didn't really know what was happening. But a bunch of my, or I shouldn't say a bunch, two of my other junior officers that I know really well were there, managing that situation. Yeah. And so on that deployment. So I mean, it's crazy in hindsight, like, especially now that I work in a job where there's no ramp ceremonies, that, and those are just the ones in country, and then the ones back CONUS too. It's a different life, and it's hard to communicate.
Yeah. So you were in Afghanistan when Price lost his life. Have you seen any of the? Maybe you saw me ask Vice Admiral Harward about
I saw
this,
that.
but
I watched him.
Yeah, I mean, have you seen any of the kind of conspiracy that?
I hadn't. I heard you bring that up, and that was the first I heard of it.
I don't
No,
know.
I think
because I've had several people ask me about it, or like I've seen comments over the years, just the occasional almost like pot shot. I mean, not. I'm trying to think if anybody that I actually know well that's asked me about it. Not that I can recall, but I've seen enough comments from different episodes or whatever. People like, why aren't you asking about this and the controversy surrounding like that he was murdered and that he uncovered something? And
yeah.
I'm just like, I haven't fucking heard of that. I mean,
I know firsthand the guys that were with him
yeah.
there at the SOTF. I can say 99% certainty that there's no merits to any of that.
Yeah.
I think that it just became too much for whatever the reason is.
Yeah.
I think there was indications of that becoming too much. There's some people in our community who have unfortunately taken their own life, and there's zero indication, right,
Yeah.
of any premeditated, of that being, that kind of ideation occurring. And those are the biggest surprises to everybody. Like, oh, dude, that's like the best dude ever. Like, I have no idea how in the hell could this possibly happen. I think there was evidence to support that, like, there was some challenges there.
Did you see any of that personally, or you just?
No, I wasn't there.
I got you.
I wasn't there.
Yeah.
They were in a different, pocket.
Yeah. I'm curious from a leadership standpoint because, I've had far fewer officers on the show than I have enlisted, and I'm always, kind of baffled by the lack of communication from your leadership prior to deployment of giving you kind of the 30,000-foot view of what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to ascertain, especially now looking back on a 20-year conflict in Afghanistan, that that we didn't really define what winning it looks like, didn't have the clear-cut objectives to what winning looks like as well as we should have, or if at all. Did you get any sense from any of your higher-ups that when you were going there, this is the macro, here's the micro, here's where you fit in, this is what we're trying to do?
I think not enough macro, clearly. I don't think easy for me to say because I'm not privy to those conversations, but I think that if I still don't understand what we were trying to accomplish, having served and having reflected on it, that there is a failure of leadership.
Yeah.
Like, that's probably the single, job, really communicate the commander's intent. Like, what is the mission? At every layer down, strategically, operationally, tactically. I think we had a pretty good view tactically what to do. It's sort of like, NA, whatever. Like, you signed up to be a warfighter, you're going to go do that. Operationally, I think a decent view, like, hey, in this general, province or, adjacent provinces, here's the challenges, here's what we're trying to do about that. But in terms of, like, the most macro view, probably stemming from the president all the way down, what's our end state objective here? And how are we going to accomplish it? It just seemed like a moving target and always nebulous. And unfortunately, in my experience in the culture of it, was not even an acknowledgement of that, because it almost seems like even if you asked up the chain of command politely in a curious manner, there's sort of like this mentality or culture of like, oh, you just don't fucking get it, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
And like, that is like totally stupid, like totally stupid. Like, from a company standpoint, imagine if you have like some like employees or something like that.
Yeah, it's
and it's like, oh, you just don't get it. Like, it's the responsibility of the leader. Like,
For you to get it.
to do that. And so, like, and this is one of the things I really love, the way Jocko thinks about this stuff, like extreme ownership, Like, it is the job of the leader. If it's not clearly communicated, it's like the leader's fault to adapt how they're communicating the strategic objectives so that the junior people understand. It's not the junior people's fault that they don't understand. It's the leader's fault for not communicating it clearly in a way that's digestible and something they can get behind and really understand. I don't think we had that in either theater, at least during my service, and just through talking to other people. Like, it becomes extremely frustrating that we didn't have that. And so I lived this weird mental battle with myself where I mentioned, the Trident is like the most important thing that to me, that I've had the opportunity to accomplish for a lot of reasons. I think, being a warrior and being a part of a warrior culture and community is something that I hold in the highest esteem. But I think the cause that the warrior is being called up for should be scrutinized significantly, to the expense of the warrior getting work in many cases, right? Like, just because we have the tool doesn't mean we should use it.
And want to be used doesn't justify being used,
I agree. And so it was never communicated clearly. I don't know, like, obviously, like, in retrospect, I know why we went to Afghanistan. Got it. We were punched in the mouth with 9/11. Let's go fucking crush these guys. Like, copy. Like, and I was late to the, and at the time, I was young and brash and ignorant enough to say, I hope this goes on for a long time so I get to get my gun in the fight. In hindsight, man, like, what was I thinking? That's sort of like a young buck way to think about things, right? Like, in my opinion. And so, and I know guys right now who are like, oh, I can't wait to go do this stuff. And it's like, I understand that. I feel the same way. I felt the same way. But we should know why we're doing this and if it's worth the cost of losing our buddies and, sending people back, having widows and having moms lose their son. Like, that's not supposed to happen. So we better, like, have a worthy cause of doing it. And so, I'm happy. I wouldn't change anything that I did. I have zero regrets. But I do think that, from a leadership standpoint, I don't know if we have our shit together. We didn't then, and I don't think we do now, unfortunately.
So, I mean, coming from the ranks of that, I know you didn't stay in to, achieve 05, 06, et cetera, but you've been around it far more than I have, or, any or most enlisted guys have. If Trump waved a fucking wand tomorrow and said, hey, guy with two last names, I want you to fix the military from a leadership standpoint, do you even know how you would go about it?
I don't know if I know today how I'd go about it, but I'm confident that I could. Yeah. Maybe it's my hubris coming back. Who knows, right? Maybe my ego coming back. But I think it just boils down to the basics, right? And it's the basics that you're taught as a junior officer going through BUDS, like even more so than OCS. Yeah. And I think that it's, really looking out for your people, making sure that you're clearly communicating the objective, making sure that they're properly trained, properly equipped, and if they're called upon to, to get the job done, that you're going to bring everybody home, or at least that the sacrifice is going to be worth like that not happening. And we ended up just, as they say, we didn't fight a 20-year war. We fought, a 1-year war 20 different times. Yeah. And I think it's just difficult for me to, to sit with. And I'd hope that we don't make the same mistakes again. I think we will, because I think we made them in Korea. I think we made them in Vietnam. I think we made them, effectively in every conflict, maybe with the exception of the Persian Gulf in the 90s. I think we make those same mistakes. And I don't necessarily, and I've gotten to know some of these very senior generals and admirals that I admire and I think are fantastic people and I think are brilliant. I actually don't, I think just the system is architected in a weird way where politics and, our civilians intersect with what the generals want to do in a weird way to a point where the lines sort of like blur. And I think that we end up just sort of like in a worse of both worlds versus the best of both worlds dynamic. So I think it's sort of like a structural challenge that we have. And also, like, it was very popular from all Americans to go into Afghanistan post 9/11, and then very deeply unpopular to go into Iraq. And I was on the side of going in at the time. I was young. now I feel like that was, short-sighted and obviously the wrong call. Like the whole premise of which we went in was
flawed, I think.
It was completely inaccurate.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I've had this conversation with quite a few vets from that conflict, and I would say in pretty much every case, we agree.
So it's a weird thing. I imagine, like, for you too. I mean, or all of us. I think it's common. We want to be war fighters. We want to be like that is something deeply ingrained in who we are and what we were trained to do. But it's weird to even talk about anything as being a success operationally on any of these deployments. It's weird for me to listen to like your guests and in other podcasts too, hear about like the successes that we've had tactically, but then come to terms with strategically it was a failure.
Yeah.
And so it's like hard to hold these like 2 or 3 things at once. Life's complicated. Like this is one thing I've learned in life is like I used to be so black and white, and I still sort of am, but life is a shade of gray.
Yeah.
And 2 things, 3 things, even 4 things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to like identify a clear conclusion from.
Yeah. 100%. After that platoon, you ended up support activity 1, cross-functional team Alpha, and then did your officer in charge in the Philippines.
Correct.
Is that right? Anything you want to share from doing the cross-functional team? I
think it's part of how I am where I am now, to be honest. Like, so for those that don't know, like the CFT at the time, which is now CRT, I believe, was basically the organic intelligence fusion, command attached to the SEAL team. I think it started during the Iraq War because we realized we needed sort of like our own sort of like intelligence fusion capability for targeting purposes for the guys on the pointy end. And so that's what I was in charge of, is like a number of different intelligence analysts, humanters, siginters, all source, all that kind of stuff. In terms of assisting with sort of like our targeting, for us and, to a certain extent for other special operations forces and, working with sort of our partner nations. And so went to the Philippines. At the time, it was not really where anybody wanted to go. I think you did a PACOM deployment too. And like, it's not where like people wanted to go when they could go to the Middle East and, sort of like, do real team guy stuff. But I was surprised with the number of, incidents that we were having down there with Abu Sayyaf and MNLF.
Well, the MILF, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, which I don't think they saw that coming.
Yeah, I mean, dude, like I was like shocked. Like we went there and like everyone was like, oh, it's gonna be pretty quiet. And we had some guys come out of that with combat action ribbons and a couple like low order like IEDs that went off like underneath the CO's truck. And it's just like, thank God that was low order and just sort of like went, and it's just like, fortunately. So it was surprising to me that was sort of the issue. And we were, I think, a rotation after, maybe 2 rotations after the Battle of Zamboanga at the time. So we were down there in Zambo, and that whole city just got fucking decimated essentially by these, Islamic extremists down there in that area. So it's not a great area to go. But I think there, by working with the intelligence fusion team is where I got to see some of the more high horsepower technology that was underwriting our technology efforts. And we were early adopters. We were told we were one of the first 20 customers of Palantir. I'm not sure how true that is because you never really know, but we were early nevertheless. And to see some of the things on the TS side and to see, how that intersected with what Palantir was doing, I just became hooked on the technology bug, so to speak, of how that was going to impact our missions, our operations moving forward. And I just, became pretty obsessed about breaking into that industry to figure out what the future of intelligence, the future of warfighting looked like from a technology standpoint.
Can you, Reader's Digest, synopsize Palantir?
Yeah. Well, I know they have a lot of different products, but the way we were explained it is they ingest data from a lot of different places. And at the time, it wasn't rudimentary machine learning. By today's standards, it's rudimentary, but they applied machine learning to all these disparate data sources to highlight various threats or opportunities for us to conduct operations from a targeting standpoint. And so it's something that, as you can imagine, it's probably common to the enterprise right now. We have data siloed in a whole lot of different places, no real non-manual way to synthesize that information to draw out, actionable insights. From a Navy SEAL standpoint, the actionable insights that you want are, where are the bad guys? What are they saying? Who do they know? And it helps you architect a targeting plan for the good guys to go and get them. So that was my experience with it then. Now I know they do a lot more because it's been 10, 15 years, and they're one of the most successful public companies out there right now.
It almost reminds me or makes me think of, it's like the Entity 1.0 from Mission Impossible. Have you seen the new?
I haven't seen it yet. I want to. I'm going to take my wife on a date night to go see it.
Yeah. Have you seen part one?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen all the other Mission Impossibles except for the most recent one.
Yeah. I mean, so the part one, obviously explains kind of how it works, but I'm curious, as somebody in that space, is that something that you grapple with at all, of a, whether you want to call it sentient or not, a rogue or element of artificial intelligence and algorithmic targeting and intelligence gathering capabilities that somehow manage to go rogue, if you will, and become a problem for the human species?
I think at this point it's sort of like a philosophical question to me versus a real one. I don't know what your experience is using Apple Siri or things like that, but that motherfucker never knows what I'm saying and can never do what I want it to do. And
I don't use it.
It's just like, hey Siri, what's the weather today? Dude, it's like maybe I mumble, maybe I don't speak like a man. I don't know what it is, but like it's always wrong. And so I think we're pretty far out from that. I think the best I can do is point to the people that help to educate me in the technology space, that are much smarter than me in this space, and I've had the opportunity to learn from many of those folks. Obviously, I track what folks like Elon are saying and all that stuff. And so I think that throughout the history of technology, there's always been a fear of that technology, whether it be the automobile, the telephone, the bicycle. All of this there's always been a fear and a pushback, and what I think, at least up till present day, is it's always led to an increase in standard of living. It's always, raised our GDP. It's always made us more productive as sort of a species and as mankind. It has brought us out of poverty. This is the most prosperous time, in the history of humanity in many ways, enabled by medicine and by technology. And so I think if history is any judge, that's probably the most likely outcome of what's happening here. Yeah. But as with anything that's positive, there can be negatives as well. Yeah. I think most people would argue that the internet is a good thing. A lot more people connected and doing business and all that stuff, but there is nefarious use of it as well. And so there is, I think, probably this Pareto principle of 80-20 positive that comes from a new technology, but with 20% in terms of hacking, vulnerabilities, and just criminal activity and bad shit that can occur as well. I think that's probably what's going to play out in the AI space as well. I think there's reasons to be optimistic, but there's also reasons to be, careful and cautious and borderline scared in terms of AI cyber attacks and things like that, and the deep fakes that are going on, the voice cloning. People listening to this could just clone our voice instantaneously. They don't even need the full episode and engage in a crime with that information. Yeah. And so there's things like that we're going to need, a technology-enabled defense against to counter what the bad guys are doing from an offense standpoint. Yeah. And so it's a weird dynamic too, because I also want our guys to have the best. This is another thing in the industry. You probably have this too. Is we are told in the military that we have the best gadgets and gizmos and kit. That's the best thing that's out there for sure. That's what we're told. But oftentimes it's actually yesterday's technology tomorrow. Our radios that we're using and many things that we were using are just clearly not cutting edge compared to consumer electronics. Yeah. And so I think that was a frustration for me in the service. And I think that probably a lot of these digital natives right now, these Gen Zers are going through. They're digital native gamers, and what they use, at home for entertainment is oftentimes not as cutting edge as what they get issued as far as special operations kit.
Yeah. I think where to me it seems like a difference, and maybe it's just because of the bias of being present, in current time. But if you contrast AI and computer generated fill in the blank compared to the bicycle, the telephone, the television, what have you. I think what seems like the stark contrast and difference is the immediacy of the exchange of information, the immediacy of relaying information to other human beings globally, coupled with the augmentation of reality to a point with which it's becoming impossible to know the difference.
Right.
To me, that's the scariest part about it, and I think. The Terminator 2 scenario, I agree. I think, is not likely. If it is, it's probably a long way off, enough to not be overly concerned. I mean, I would hate to kick ourselves 30 years from now and say if we had been more concerned and took it more seriously, it wouldn't have happened, should it happen. But I think right now where I struggle with kind of the morality of the decision-making process specifically boils down to the targeting aspect, which is, say, drones.
Yep.
Obviously, there's so many AI-based algorithms that can target far better than a group of human beings, faster, more accurately, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm curious to get your take as somebody who's in the space is, do you draw a line where the targeting from start to finish is done by somebody who's not, or done by an entity that's not human?
I think you have to. I think ultimately it needs to be human on the loop in some capacity. But we already have is it a failure? Like when we say it's a failure of intelligence, like a failure of intelligence in terms of at the end of the day, it's a human who makes the decision to go into Iraq. Like it was a human who made the decision, due to a failure of intelligence to do a variety of strikes, to include in the Afghan withdrawal. I think we struck somebody, and it was reported that this was the people that were behind the Abbey Gate, explosions and all that stuff. And it turns out it wasn't. It was innocent people, and that's people at the end of the day that made that decision based on information that they collected in a breakdown and the flaws, and it was wrong, right? It was wrong information. And so I don't think that we can get to a point where we blindly trust, the machine or artificial intelligence with life and death consequences like that. But at the same time, what's really interesting to consider is what if the enemy is?
Right.
And what if their OODA loop is orders of magnitude more effective than yours, whether that be in aerial dogfighting or other situations? What do you then do? And so I think that we probably pretty quickly, like it or not, and there's great reasons not to that you brought up in terms of the morality of it. It's sort of like nuclear proliferation, and that led to the Cold War. Is well, do we not want to have nuclear weapons when the Soviets have a lot of them? Well, there's a lot of morality that goes in line with using those. Probably the most immoral weapon to use, given the mass casualties they'll create against innocent people. So I think that's probably what's going to play out here is we can't afford as a country to not embrace this, because as unsatisfying as it is to say, China and others will. And so do we want to be the ones that don't have it, or are we in the midst of an AI arms race? I think we're in the midst of an AI arms race. And I think that intersecting AI and training AI with our values is imperative, because we can't lose that. And if we embolden a machine or a set of algorithms to act like the Chinese, then I think we sort of lose who we are. And so I think that's going to be a really challenging thing. Obviously, lots of debate in terms of the regulation of AI, how much we want to invest in it, how much we want to utilize it and where do we draw that line. I think there's probably consensus broadly that line is, in terms of making the decision. But I think, pretty clearly, you look at any of the, AI foundation models, OpenAI, Anthropic, and, everybody else that's out there, it's remarkable what it can do instantaneously that a person, a whole team of people, couldn't do in weeks, and it can do in minutes. And so when you consider that sort of technology horsepower, it is pretty prolific.
It's a sobering reality to hear you say that, but I don't disagree. Is that, would you rather get left behind or engage in something that maybe
it's unsatisfying? It's one of these areas. It's not
like
black and white. There's a shade of gray, right? It's sort of like we were saying earlier. It's like, what do you do? So even if we do disagree, I guess, as Americans in terms of like the use of it, there's some game theory there in terms of like, what about our adversaries? And so like, is our hand forced? And I think it sort of is. At least I don't know another way around it.
Yeah, it's a pick your poison for sure. A hypothetical I would throw at you, and maybe it doesn't even matter at this point with what you just said, but I imagine like kind of tactically right now, imagine a scenario where you've got a drone that is doing an ISR, eyes in the sky kind of thing, supporting a platoon on the ground that's going in to assault a target, and an ambush is being set up. The drone recognizes it, and if it doesn't act on its own without us saying, "Oh, that's then it's too late," and so we authorize that drone to strike human targets without any human interface or authorization whatsoever. Like, to me, that's a pretty realistic scenario currently.
I think it is, and the way I've so I guess for some context, so I mean, I started a venture capital fund after my time in service, moved up to Silicon Valley, worked at a couple of the bigger venture capital firms. First, Andreessen Horowitz, and then Lightspeed Venture Partners, two of the big multi-billion-dollar investment firms in Silicon Valley that invest in cutting-edge technology. So pretty much any of the household name technology companies that are out there that people have heard about, Silicon Valley, has invested in those and gotten those started, whether it be Facebook, NVIDIA, OpenAI, all of these companies, SpaceX, they're all venture capital-backed companies. Arguably, the most important companies of our time got their start by raising money from people called venture capitalists. And so I worked at a couple of those firms. And I was fortunate to have the opportunity, I guess for the third time in my life, career-wise, to be mentored not only by Olympic coaches and by decorated Silver Star recipients in the teams, but now sort of like whatever the equivalent of that is in venture capital, the people that have been in the technology industry and investing in these things and starting these things for decades. So I got to learn what they look for and the technology shifts that occur over time and the platform shifts, as we call them. And ultimately, why I decided to start our own firm called Harpoon is because I thought that we were going too far against our roots of how Silicon Valley started. Silicon Valley started, like in its origins, effectively during the Cold War to develop new technology for Uncle Sam to win the Cold War. And that's where it got its name, like, and all the silicon and all the hardware that came out of that space. We got spoiled as an industry through the dot-com boom and bust and cloud, apps, mobile, so on and so forth. And those ecosystems drew pretty far apart. And I thought there was a place to make those ecosystems draw, closer back together. And so started Harpoon with a mission orientation to invest in technologies that we thought were impactful from a national security and prosperity standpoint to the United States, things that could intersect with national level priorities. And we call them the freedom stack, which is AI, cybersecurity and IT. We have energy. We have bio, health, and security. Like, all of these things are really important, I think, to the national interest. I think most people would agree, especially in D.C., that these are technologies important to the national interest. What sort of happened since starting this is a couple things. Great power competition. China has become a looming threat on the horizon for us that has embraced, through state-sponsored technology development, all of these critical technology areas where we've done it sort of from a free market standpoint. It's only very recently that Uncle Sam has gotten behind those trends in a meaningful way. But what's also happened is the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where for the first time ever, I think we've seen drone war 1. I think that's what this is going to go down in history as, is drone war 1, where we've seen a smaller, outnumbered, less financially backed, less equipped force operate almost like the insurgents that we fought against, which is Ukraine, and find a way to outmaneuver and render obsolete the sophisticated large-scale weapon systems and the people that Russia has. And so now they're producing millions of small drones a year that have strategic level impact on the battlefield. And so I have a decent level of proximity to this because I know some people that have been there, and we started a company. It was the first time we've ever done this outside of our venture fund to help address this problem and operate at the nexus of this problem. We believe that the world has changed forever by virtue of that, where we're at a unique point in time where geopolitics is intersecting with technology more than we ever would have thought, and it's happening at the tactical edge, where large-scale attritable, meaning sort of like affordable throwaway systems, effectively hobbyist drones, are reshaping TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures on the battlefield, and ultimately that's going to transform doctrine for the first time since the introduction of the machine gun. It's going to be that big. And I don't think people realize that yet broadly, to include in the United States military. So we helped start a company called Vector, which operates at that intersection broadly. We want to be the subject matter experts in all things technology-enabled warfare, which includes training, which includes TTPs, doctrine, as well as products to service that demand, both offensive and defensive, to help protect our guys to be more capable on the battlefield. So a lot of the things that we're talking about here, I think are, my opinions are informed from working with these guys who do have firsthand experience living in that threat environment, offensively and defensively, in terms of where the future of war is going. And a big reason why we decided to start the company is, from everybody I talked to, nobody has an answer of what we do. How do we do infill in a contested environment like this? It's like flying IEDs effectively with 20-kilometer plus ranges, where you can't jam them like we could up mini IEDs, because just like they had command wire IEDs then, we've got command wire fiber optics that go 20 kilometers on the bottom of these drones. So you can't so it's just like the same thing done differently in a more dispersed and disaggregated threat environment. And so it is a concern of mine about the enemy, getting the lead on us, China or any other non-state actor getting a lead on us on this technology area, and us as a military force broadly not being able to maneuver on the battlefield. We're too accustomed to technology superiority in terms of our strategic level assets, the F-35 and all of our, our carrier strike groups, our satellite systems. We're at a point now where these things are becoming so diffuse that the battlefield is being fundamentally reshaped. And this is something that we need to figure out. And we think a company should help our government and our warfighters figure that out. Yeah. Very similar to how you're helping with the dog program, like helping our military, at least historically, helping them figure out how to have the best working dogs. It's not something that there's a lot of domain expertise on. And now on the technology front, there's not a lot of domain expertise because it's just so new.
Yeah. So I guess back to the question, in that hypothetical scenario, would you be okay with kind of us as a society, as a military, as a Department of Defense?
Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No,
so
right.
there is already use cases that I'm well aware of where if you're in a certain kill box and keypad where you are cleared hot as an autonomous drone. And I think that's how they're controlling it. Yeah. So it's just like, we know we have a clear blue force picture. We know the collateral damage situation, and you can program these assets to operate, as if they're cleared hot beyond a certain line of demarcation or in a certain grid.
Yeah.
And so that, I think, that is a way where I think that you can, I don't want to say have your cake and eat it too, but that's a mitigant to some of the concerns you're bringing up. And I would be concerned to just say like, hey, there's no boundary conditions in terms of how these systems operate. They're just enabled to go weapons free.
Yeah.
I think that is something that is going to be really hard for us as Americans to get behind. But I could see a situation where we're going to have a huge crisis of conscience if the enemy has systems that are operating that way and we're intentionally holding ourselves back if things go hot.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going to play out, but I think we do need to stay core to our values. And the second you throw those out is where we have broader societal, like, who are we questions as Americans.
Yeah.
So I agree with what you're saying.
I mean, obviously the theory is it would never happen where the system that's on your side either mistakenly targets our own guys, or I don't know how accurate or true they are. You see some of these videos of like these humanoid robots in China that all of a sudden freak out and start attacking people, and like, so, in this event, like there's a kill switch and somehow it doesn't work, and now like you've got this fucking Reaper style drone circling that's just, taking people out because it's been authorized to strike on its own through a targeting program or whatever.
That might happen. I think we're a little further out on that because I think a lot of people out there, even like senior technologists and people, in the government, are all in on autonomous weapons and all this stuff. I think we're further out than many people think on that front, and I could be wrong. Reason being, like, we've had a hard enough time getting Waymos and Teslas to operate autonomously in a city where we know the entire dynamic. We've mapped it. We have complete data, complete connectivity. We've had the infrastructure put in place. When the enemy is destroying your connectivity and the enemy is destroying, is shooting at you to disrupt your capability, you know what it's like. It's almost like all bets are off and you go back to basics. It's like why we have iron sights on our guns. We might have the red dots, but you better be damn good at shooting iron sights, is because technology is an enabler, but it can also be a hindrance if you don't know the basics. And so I think we're a little bit further away than some people think on that. So fortunately, I think that we'll have the time to figure this out. Yeah. Even if we don't have the answers today, I think that structurally we'll have the time to sort of like figure out where that line is.
Yeah, it's an ominous prospect for sure, because on the one hand, I absolutely agree with you in that, like, other countries are going to push that envelope and not give a fuck about the morality of any of it. They're going to be looking at the potential advantage and not think twice about it. And so your kind of hand is forced to try to keep up with them doing things that maybe from a morality standpoint you disagree with. It's pretty frightening. What is the Black Flag program, and what can you tell us about that?
So as I mentioned earlier, we're a venture capital fund. Harpoon is a venture capital fund that's existed to invest in the national interest for the past 8 years since we started it. What's happened in that time is a lot of things that I alluded to. One of the positive things that's happened in the startup and entrepreneurship community is a influx of founders that want to build new companies for the national interest in all the areas that I referred to a moment ago, in these critical technology areas. It's very different than when I got out of the teams and moved to Silicon Valley. Like, I was like sort of persona non grata in many areas, because of my background, and it wasn't something that aligned with sort of that culture in many ways. Now there's a tidal shift in terms of an interest in building capabilities for the national interest, which aren't just drone weapons or what have you. It is like next generation energy resilience, critical materials and onshoring our supply chain, next gen robotics, next gen pharmaceuticals, next gen, all of these things are being built by this next era of founders, much more so than the ones of a decade ago that were building chat apps and social networks and things of that nature, which are interesting and more entertainment oriented, but they're not like something that's probably in the national interest we would probably agree on.
So it's essentially come full circle the initial intent of Silicon Valley.
Totally. It's come full circle. Yeah. And we'll see how long this lasts. Like, things, ebb and flow in life. So Black Flag is our attempt to support this next generation of founders to build their companies more efficiently and service the public sector demand for these capabilities. What Harpoon, our organization, has always done is invest in these companies and then help them navigate the path to market with Uncle Sam, whether it be the DoD, Department of Energy, the intelligence community, et cetera, helping them identify budget lines, programmatics, and funding for their product, and ultimately to try and help it scale to serve the public good. So that's our broader thesis. Black Flag is a manifestation of that, focused purely on companies that are brand new, that are just getting started. So companies that are, frankly, a couple guys in an idea, and they have an idea for a technology, an idea for how this is going to reshape a market. We'll invest in them, anywhere from $250K to $1 million, and then we'll support them in the way that we've always supported the companies in terms of bringing their product to market to solve national level priorities. So that's what it is. And I think it uniquely has the opportunity for success now compared to 6, 8, 10 years ago, because there wasn't the founders then building these capabilities for the national interest. And now there is. There's a unique window where I think things have changed. It's these Gen Z guys. And we talked a lot about them earlier. Ruthlessly disciplined, very focused on their mission and their craft. Many of the founders that we've invested in literally sleep in the office 6 days a week. Blackout curtains, in the office, sleep under their desk. They are married to their craft and obsessed by it. And I generally think that these mission-oriented people that are willing to embrace the suck like a team guy would on a deployment, but in a business context, have the opportunity to bring us into a true future of abundance with these technologies and of greater security. So I think it's a good thing.
I mean, for sure, it's encouraging. I mean, you know, it's to me there was a you talk about tidal ebbs and flows and et cetera, and with millennials in particular, especially the second half of millennial generation, man, it just seemed like kind of a black cloud of like, fuck, where are we going?
What are we gonna do?
Yeah, but now with the resurgence, agreed. I've seen some of the most impressive people I've met in the last few years have been late teens, early 20s, Gen Zers that are just fucking monsters when it comes to whatever they do.
Right.
And agreed, like some of the level of dedication that's so surprisingly pleasant that it does give me a lot of hope and encouragement for our nation's future. In that same vein, I'm curious, what do you think warfare is going to look like 10, 20, 50 years from now, and how is it going to change, not just specific to drones, but generally speaking?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to forecast. Like, I can't proclaim to know what it's going to look like. I do think the intermittent next step is going to be more akin to what we're seeing in Ukraine. I mean, just the operation the other weekend, where they probably one of the best special operations that will go down in history, in my opinion, with no like shooters in the sense that we were, where they forward staged in trucks the roof of a truck that would launch dozens of drones off of it and then go strike an enemy airfield and take out strategic bombers. I think that's one for the history books in terms of just like the complexity of a special operations mission, the rehearsals, the logistics, the people in place to smuggle something in, to pre-position it and have it to work that way, that mitigates almost entirely risk to force on the friendly side, in that example.
Yeah.
What an asymmetric opportunity. Something that, man, I hope we're paying attention as the United States in terms of like how these things are being used, how we can use them, but also the fact that that is just sort of the first chapter, the opening, whatever paragraph in the book of what I think is coming.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of thing at a larger scale is going to really change our force protection posture. It's going to have to. How are we going to have layered defense from a counter UAS standpoint? And that's not, it's just like UXS also too, like, unmanned for whatever systems, undersea, surface, air. Are we going to get to a point where we have space? Probably. And so I think all of this is being reshuffled, and it's going to render a different use case for our strategic assets. How we park them, as we saw with the Russians, you can't just like park them fucking out there anymore. They're a great target, even for something that's not like an over-the-horizon, traditional missile that you just don't, that with almost no, attribution. It could be like non-attrib, and you don't know who did it necessarily. Yeah. Really, really complicated to figure out. So I think that's where it's going. And so if I had to sort of like forecast out further, I think we're going to have a lot of serious conversations about how we employ boots on the ground, when we employ them, when the enemy has these systems there. What's the place for SOF? What's the place for special operations? How do we interact in a battlefield like that? I think it's going to end up being us being nerd warriors, is how I think about it. I think it's going to be jack dudes that can still do day one, shit, but are enabled by technology and goggles and autonomous drones that are affordable and effectively as dispendable as a mortar round. Yeah. Like, we don't worry about picking up the mortar round after we shot it. I think these things are going to be the same kind of thing. And so I think if you just forecast that forward, a period of a couple decades, I think that's what it's going to look like. But I think there's going to be a huge rewrite of doctrine, TTPs, et cetera. I mean, how are the rotary wing guys going to adapt to this? When are they going to get approval? If we got a down man, everybody knows what we do. We call up Kazovac, whether that be ground or air, to come in and get our guy out. Like, that's what we do. Who's going to approve that now when our airspace is contested by these things that could have a mass casualty event.
Yeah.
I don't know if the the ground force commander or whoever, the SOTF or whatever it is going to approve like, a 60 or a 47 or whatever the next gen thing is going in there when there's a high risk to that airframe and the flight crew and everybody on the ground of getting shot down in a contested environment. And so like these are all things that we need to figure out that I don't have the answers to. But I don't think anybody has the answers to them yet. And so that's why I think it's of particular importance that we get ahead of it so that we don't try to figure it out like JIATO, like after it's like obvious that like we have no mobility because there's IEDs everywhere.
Right.
It's like, well, these are maneuverable IEDs in whatever domain because there's going to be, unmanned ground vehicle IEDs effectively, aerial vehicles of all different form factors, all different, command, det, autonomous, so on and so forth, flying around. Same thing in the ocean. Same thing subsea. I think there's going to need to be a big rewrite in terms of how we project force and how we conduct our warfighting capability as a country. I think that's coming very soon.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me think of a couple of kind of worst case scenarios, specific to the first one being rotary wing, as you bring it up. Imagine a scenario like Somalia or any of the urban combat environments in Iraq and Afghanistan over the last couple decades where, there's, let's say, a dozen or 2 dozen $200 DJI drones with a couple pounds of explosives and some sort of accelerator liquid, infused into it or whatever. And, a couple of Blackhawks come in to fast rope on a rooftop and fucking 3 dozen drones attack it.
Yep.
Like, that's game over for everybody.
Game over.
And that's not difficult for them to pull off at this point,
It's actually pretty easy.
Yeah. The other one that, the young man that was on with Mach Industries earlier this year, one of the scenarios he was talking about that was pretty frightening too, and I would ask, as somebody in the space that's pretty well connected on both sides, both government and enterprise, is, let's say China is still in international waters with a decent-sized vessel that has thousands of these drones on them, that are not hackable, not jammable, pre-targeted for the White House or the Capitol building or the Pentagon or whatever, and they launch, 10,000 of these miniature drones that just fucking swarm Washington, D.C. Like, are we prepared to deal with something like that as we sit here?
No.
I mean, how do we unfuck that?
I wish I knew.
I mean, that's terrifying.
I wish I knew. I've thought a lot about this. I've met a lot of companies. We invested in, back when I was at my prior firm, we invested in a counter drone company. But that was an RF-based defeat system, which is part of what we need. We need, I think, a layered defense that includes and how do you scale that across every piece of critical infrastructure and into the Golden Dome philosophy. There's just, now it's not just ICBMs that are going to come up and over the top. It's that example that you just brought up. It's the example of what the Ukrainians did to the Russians really recently, but maritime-based and a shit ton more, right? So it's not outside of the realm of what's technologically feasible today. Actually pretty straightforward. Sure, you got to build a lot of these things, but it's not that complicated compared to other things. And so what do we do about that? Or does it become something that's sort of like the nuclear deterrence we have, where we got subs with nuclear weapons and it's sort of like mutually assured destruction? Does this become part of the nuclear triad, but non-nuclear? I don't know, right? I think it sort of has to in a certain way, where we need to have, there's going to have to be some aspect of that. But the frustrating part and the frightening part is any state and non-state actor, the technology is here and it's affordable enough for anybody to do it. Yeah. So how can you keep tabs on everybody? I know that back in the day, not that long ago, some of the tier 1 units were chasing around guys with Stinger missiles, right? We didn't want Stinger missiles around where we have airframes. Obviously, we don't want that shit shot down. Probably good mission set to find bad guys who have those things. Now we have the equivalent of Stinger missiles that cost $1,000.
And there's millions of them.
And a million of them. And you can do that. So like, what are we going to do? We going to send around our tier 1 guys around the world to go like find everybody with a hobbyist drone? And like, and we know from our time overseas, like how easy it is to blend in and pretend like you're not a bad guy when you actually are. And it's just complicated. So I think it's just going to be a, frustrating period of time for us to grapple with what to do.
Yeah.
And, the second we have something that negatively impacts our troops in theater or us here domestically is when we're going to do like what Jaito did, like build the MRAP and do all these things. But I just think we're going to put a lot of money after things, and the enemy's going to find a way around it.
Yeah.
And it's going to have to be this constant game of cat and mouse. And I think it's all changing before our eyes.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that we don't do the too little, too late.
Me too.
Aspect of like Jaito. But the third scenario that I thought of, and I'm curious because of what I do for a living and have done, especially as it relates to watching the Vector video, it made me immediately think of the use of dogs in a very similar capacity. Do you see drone technology, the way that you're working with the Vector program, eliminating the use or requirement necessity for dogs at all?
I haven't thought about that, but knee-jerk reaction is I don't think so. But I guess it's possible. I don't think so, because I don't think that we have low-cost systems that have the sensory perception of a dog.
Yeah.
And it's probably similar to saying, like, when do these weapon systems take the place of people in its entirety? I think there's a place for them, right? Like, there's a place for them. And I just think that it just becomes more complicated. And so I don't know how it all fits together in the future or even in the midterm, but I know that we need to have a conscious effort towards fixing this and trying to solve it. But it's like anything else in life. Like, we might not ever totally solve it, but we're all on this journey of self-improvement. Like, it's not like I'm done tomorrow. Like, it's just like we're always trying to get better. And I think that's sort of the mentality that we need to have, instead of saying like, oh, there is this one widget, this one thing that's going to solve everything. That's not how life works. Like, we're just like on this like perpetual journey. And, if we believe that, like in the SEAL ethos, that we demand innovation, that's what we should demand every single day from ourselves to constantly get better. It's not like it's ever, our mission is never complete, right? And so I think that's part of it.
Yeah. I mean, as we're talking about it, the wheels turn for me. And I think if you look at the dog as a singularity, there's the two capabilities that it's providing predominantly are explosive detection and apprehension.
Yep.
Can a drone replace that? Not really. You could argue the apprehension side, where it whether
have they been replaced in like airports?
No, they haven't.
So if they haven't been there, then that's probably sort of a leading indicator, because you have a static, fixed infrastructure that like you can fund, amortize over however many years, and like if dogs haven't been replaced in airports, it's probably further off than they're going to be replaced in the battlefield, in my mind.
Well,
so like if they haven't been replaced there, like the technology is not good enough to just be plugged into the fucking wall there to like replace them. Right. Probably not going to be downrange,
Agreed. If you're isolating that as an application in its current form operationally, but to me where it rabbit holes is saying, okay, well, the dog is an extension of the human component that's going in there in the first place. So if drone technology
humans aren't going.
Can mitigate the fact that humans even need to do it, then the answer is still yes. If whatever target complex you're talking about has shitbag A in it, and we don't even need to send humans, we can send drones that can positively identify them and then just level the building. I mean, there's so many different.
Totally.
Kind of, it's like the baseball hand game.
But I mean, how it goes. People always want a BDA. Like, when was the last time, even if we hit something without a human needed, like that we haven't sent humans to sort of like check it out and confirm and like, gather SSE. And so I think that unless the drones can do that at some point, but I don't know.
We've talked about the foreign policy aspect, the fact that we don't really have much of a response to some of these kind of worst case scenarios. If you dial it down to the more micro, just here in the United States, do you worry that drones will be used domestically, and or do you see an increase from a law enforcement standpoint being used here in the United States, whether it's riot control or surveillance or even terrorist attacks here in the United States by not even necessarily homegrown, but I mean, if you like you don't even need to smuggle anything in. You could have people just come here illegally or whatever and have a few dozen of them use a few drones apiece and attack schools. I mean, who knows? Like, is that a concern? Do you see any?
I think it's a matter of time. It's if not, or it's when, not if.
Yeah.
It's for sure going to happen. And I'm not happy to say that. Like, it doesn't give me joy. I just think it's obvious how cheap it is, how easy it is. It's not hard, and I want to go through all the use cases because it's not like I'm a tactical genius, but you can come up with what they are in terms of mass casualty things, and then like what's our response to that? I don't think we know. I mean, we saw, frankly, when President Trump was shot, like I was just like some dude with a gun.
Yeah.
And we haven't gotten the full scoop on that, which is something that irks me. But like, how much easier it'd be with somebody with like standoff of a couple clicks to come in and do that, and like there's nothing that's going to take it down.
Yeah.
That's not good. And so, like, that's just a single example. And so I think in terms of, like, law enforcement or public safety use cases, there's a lot of them, and I know that police departments have been, like, trying to do that. Their budgets are pretty constrained, and, like, it's pretty difficult for them to, historically, to get the budget to do this. There's a company that we tried to invest in. We missed it, and it recently got acquired. Would have been a great return, but they were great folks. I really like the founders. And they were building essentially drones for public safety use cases because a lot of these police departments are understaffed and they can't respond instantaneously to a 911 call, and many of which are false alarms or what have you. And so they essentially dispatch these drones, these unmanned aerial vehicles, to go out and get eyes on before a person could even get there, and relegate sort of like a next step. Hey, do we need people? Do we need cars out there? What's the situation? Or to track, so if there's a burglary, what have you, they could get eyes on and actually track the burglar versus them getting away. And so it was actually, the presentation was genius. It looked really, really cool, and the company was already bought by sort of an incumbent in the space for a really, really good price. But there's things like that are for sure coming, and it's sort of pretty apparent when you see the pitch. It's like, and you see that it's already being used by various police departments. Like, dude, this is like a no-brainer, like from a public safety standpoint. But also, there is some headline risk in the sense that some people are probably uncomfortable for a lot of the reasons we've talked about. Like, do we really want a machine in a surveillance state, going and doing that used inappropriately? We obviously don't. But if I would like that to respond. Like, I'm gone right now. My kids and wife are at home, and if the alarm went off, like, I know the cops are going to come because they have when I haven't been home before. It's been just some false alarms. A kid trips it, whatever, and they show up. But it takes 20 minutes, right?
It's always when you're not home.
Yeah, always when I'm home. And so it's sort of funny, at least in hindsight. And so it'd be nice to sort of like get eyes on like pretty quickly. And I think those, just, using our own sort of like, prior experience in sense, like the faster you get eyes on, the better you can sort of like gather essay and make a decision. And so I think that's coming.
Yeah, that is neat technology. And, I'm trying to think of reasons why I would be opposed to it. And I really can't think of any.
I can't think of any either,
Because I don't think it's a privacy issue if it's linked to a 911 call.
Correct.
I mean, to me, that's no different than a cop showing up.
Correct.
So now if they were just saying, oh, we're going to do some recon by surveillance,
routine patrol. This
like,
is just going around. And
like
to a
that,
certain extent, like depending on the situation, like maybe I'm okay with that. Like, just like I want my neighborhood to be safe.
Yeah.
I don't want packages stolen off my porch or any of that stuff. And so maybe no different than a cop car that's just patrolling. Yeah. It's a deterrent, right? Yeah. There's probably less criminal activity if you have like policemen driving around, because the chances of you getting dinged is probably higher.
Yeah. It makes me think of I don't know why this just popped in my head, but Back to the Future 2, where there's like a drone walking a dog. It's like a fucking
I don't remember
a floating leash and a dog.
That's your dream come true, man. You're going to be out of a job. The dogs are going to still have a job. Now there's going to be the digital
the humanoid
Mike Ritland.
Handler. Yeah. No, I
smarter than you, more handsome than you.
That's a pretty low bar on both of those, but. I actually really enjoy walking dogs, and same with picking up dog shit. Like stuff like that, the animal.
You enjoy picking up dog shit? So I had a funny story about picking up dog shit. Yeah. So like for whatever reason, like so we got a dog. We lived downtown. We got our Frenchie, right? My wife and I got married, and my dad was he passed away a few years ago, unfortunately. But he's like, so what do you do with the poop? He's an older dude at the time. He passed away in his early 80s. And I'm like, well, we go pick it up. And remember, we grew up on a farm, and so like the dog would basically just shit in the orchard, and it was like whatever. We had nobody, whatever. I'm like, well, we pick it up, And he's like, what do you mean you pick it up? I'm like, you don't get a bag, you pick up the dog shit. He's like, oh, great. This is what my son's amounted to. Picking up dog shit. Like, I'm gonna put that in the newspaper, a picture of you holding dog shit, and say, my son. And like, he was just like, I'm like, Dad, I think you're overreacting about this, but like, so that's my dog shit pick it up story from my old man.
Well, there is an element that is a little counterintuitive to me on a large scale of, while I wouldn't want to live in an environment where everybody's dogs are shitting everywhere and it's being left. On the same token, like, from an environmental standpoint, you're taking something that's biodegradable, putting it in something that's not, and then throwing it away. It does kind of not make sense a little bit from that perspective. But for me personally, the reason why I actually enjoy doing it is for two reasons. One is that, the dog's stool, just like in human beings, tells you a lot about the health of the animal. And so to me, one of the things I do, several times a week when I go and pick up shit in the yard is look at it. I'm not digging through it with my hands or anything, but if there's something that's off, I want to know, and that tells me, if there's a problem or if they ate something fucking weird or if they have a GI issue or whatever. But then also, because I own a dog food company, that's also another reflection of, the stool consistency, the volume, the color, that, all of those things play a role in telling me how they're responding to the food too. So I always pick up my own shit. Most of my neighbors have like these services that come and it's like this truck pulls up and a dude goes and picks up shit.
I get that number. I don't think we have it. Have you seen the meme about, it's basically like if there's an alien that came to planet Earth and witnessed or was trying to interpret who was in charge here, and they'd see the dog and they'd see us, picking up their shit, they'd assume the dog is the one who's in charge. It's a funny meme.
Yeah, there's a lot of truth.
There is a lot,
just in the spoilage and caretaking of a lot of dogs. But all right, so within Harpoon, you've got Black Flag, you've got the Vector program. Are there any other elements to that, or anything that I haven't asked you that I should have?
No, I think you have. At a high level, we invest in early stage technology companies that we think have the opportunity to impact national security and prosperity. Black Flag is a way to do that to people who are just getting started, just getting started. They're leaving a big company or fresh out of school or what have you. It's a little bit earlier stage. And then Vector is our first time, creating a company from the inside that we help to assemble the co-founding team and the management team and bring it to market.
Yeah. I am curious. The funds that you guys are using to invest in different companies, I can only assume that there are far more approaches and pitches to you than you have capital for.
Totally.
Like, other than the obvious kind of boilerplate business questions that you're going to ask somebody in terms of what their business plan and customer base and, just the overall pitch, do you have a method?
We do.
That goes beyond checking these boxes.
The boxes.
Is there a gut feeling?
It's an interesting segment of finance where it's much less science than it is art.
Yeah.
And the reason that it's much more people-centric, because when you're investing in these things, there's no product yet. There's no metrics in terms of the product's performance because it doesn't exist yet. You don't know for sure that it is technically feasible, although it's theoretically feasible in many cases. There's a lot of risk with the co-founders, or sometimes there's one founder, sometimes there's multiple. People break up. Right? There's risk there. Like, what if this chief technology officer and the CEO don't get along and they go separate ways? What happens to the business? Can these teams and these founders recruit smart people to join them? They create a mission around what they do and bring in people that are better than them to help build the product, to sell the product? Is there customer demand for this product? Are the dogs going to eat the dog food is literally what we say. So I think, fortuitous here, like, do the customers care enough to buy it?
Yeah.
And so there's some I guess ways we think about understanding if that's the case. In many situations, if it's an existing market opportunity where customers are already buying an alternative, there's budget, but the switching cost is usually the challenge. People don't want to switch because of a variety of reasons, unless something is literally 10x better or 10x cheaper, ideally both. And so basically those are attributes we think through. But there's also new market opportunities where there's no precedent, frankly, for if something is going to work. You look at Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, completely different business models, some adjacent precedents that people that want to ride in a car and they need transportation and they need lodging, but are they going to feel comfortable riding in somebody else's? Now it's something that we take for granted. I'm going to take a Uber or a Lyft when I get out of here, and I'm not going to think twice about it. But back then, that was sort of a sketchy proposition.
Yeah.
And so many people would say no to investing in that and sort of miss the opportunity for something that was just transformative to, from an investment standpoint and from the impact on an industry. And so for us, depending on the stage, at the pre-seed where the Black Flag program is situated, we're purely looking for horsepower of the founder. And it's one of those things that over time, you just get a better gauge for it. It's sort of like picking somebody who would go through bud selection. There's still no guarantee they're going to make it through necessarily, no guarantee they're going to create a company that's lasting and huge, but they have the raw attributes to do it. And if you see enough of those types of people on an annualized basis, you can make some pretty good relative decisions. Yeah. In other words, we routinely see probably about 2,000 pitches a year just through me and my investment team. We meet with 2,000 different founders in early stage companies a year. Now with the Black Flag program, we're probably going to over double that because it's coming inbound and it's earlier. And so if you think of seeing 4,000 or 5,000 a year, on a relative basis, you can sort of interpret which ones are higher caliber perhaps than others. But it's tremendously frustrating because we've said no to things many times. In the industry, we say we have sins of omission and sins of commission. So sins of omission are oftentimes the most painful, where we weren't quite able to get there. We didn't fully understand it or think that the market was going to adopt it, and it did. And we said no. Yeah. And that's just oh shit, this is a multi-billion-dollar company. Yeah. We said no. Well, how can we learn from that? How can we identify that in other situations? And it's so multivariate. I oftentimes say the future gets a vote, even if I think our underwriting and the way we think about it is dead on and we're right. I guess one example of this is we invested in an AI security company, a company that's securing AI algorithms from fraud, manipulation, and abuse. So just like there's software security, we thought is probably a reasonable premise that there's going to need to be AI security, right? But this is before AI got big. And so we invested in a company with another very well-known venture firm, and the people that were the foremost leaders in the space, from Berkeley, Harvard, MIT, all the best, in the space. They started getting some adoption. All of a sudden, AI went crazy over the past few years. And now there's dozens of competitors, where they used to be an N of one, the only person doing it, certainly of any credibility. Now there's dozens, if not 100 other people with a lot of credibility doing it. And so what's that lead to from a market dynamic and a customer dynamic? It leads to sort of analysis paralysis from a customer. And so it's really challenging where it's sort of a little bit frustrating. We're to know the premise and the thesis was correct, but once people get hip to that, there's going to be fast followers. And oftentimes it's not the first that wins, it's the one that maybe comes second or third. There's another analogy we use, the pioneers sometimes get the arrows in the back. Yeah. It's it's the ones who go out there, just because you're first doesn't mean you're going to be the one to be successful. You get some of the arrows in the back. And so it's frustrating because there's oftentimes a first mover advantage, but also there's an exception. There's just exceptions to every rule. So I think what we default to in the broader framework is you have the technology, you have the market, and you have the team. That's a three-legged stool of what we assess when we're investing in an early stage startup company. I tend to over-optimize for the founders and the team. Because I think if we optimize for that, you by default solve for those other two legs of the stool. If we pick the right founders, they are going to be the domain experts in a technology area. They're going to be the domain experts in a market segment if we do it right. And so we can sort of solve like, you know, 3 birds with 1 stone by picking the right team, but that is the broader general picture that we use to assess it.
Yeah. So, I mean, with getting that kind of volume of pitches, I mean, is it something where procedurally that company X just emails you and says, hey, here's our pitch deck,
Yeah.
you know, so are a lot of these that you're saying no to ones that like you're rejecting in a matter of seconds when you see, you're just like, nah.
Yeah, it ranges. Yeah, there's some that are clearly just not a fit for a variety of reasons. Stage, what have you, sector, you know, things that just like aren't within the mandate of our Freedom Stack, you know, rubric. And so those are easy to sort of like weed out pretty quickly. And to your point, yes, a lot of them are emails. I think we have standardized it a little bit but through the application process for Black Flag. So we ask a lot of these questions up front and they're filled out. So we sort of like can more seamlessly give the courtesy back to the founder of like whether or not we want to dig in or whether it's a fit or not. And we get it wrong a lot, so it's really hard. And so like I really admire all of these founders for putting their life's work behind whatever their craft is. And I hope they all get funded by somebody, even if it's not us, because I think it's a good thing for our entrepreneurship community. And something that's pretty uniquely American is this entrepreneurship DNA that we have here. We're very nonlinear, ambitious thinkers in America. And I think it's one of the things that actually makes us great. Yeah. And so I think being part of that is something that gets me out of bed every day and makes me excited to see that entrepreneurial DNA in everybody that we interface with. I think the best source of investments for us comes from people we already know. It's probably no different than maybe how you get a guest on the show. You know, I imagine, hopefully, if I did a good job today, and if I was to like say, hey, you really got to talk to this guy, it's a special story, you'll probably put that up on the totem pole versus like somebody that reaches out to you and says, hey, I got a story to tell, right? Sure. You know, it's the same thing. Yeah. And so if we have a founder that we had a great relationship with and we know is a meat eater in what they do and a pipe hitter in what they do, like if they tell me, Larsen, you got to meet this guy. I almost don't ask any questions. I'm like, done, please, here's my cell. Call me immediately. Yeah. That is sort of like I think the best form of deal flow for us is referral based. Yeah. And we also have like some baked in trust with that too. So it enables us to accelerate our process.
It's like getting laid at a wedding.
Yeah, exactly.
So you got instant credibility.
Instant credibility if you're a groomsman, right?
Yeah. Why are so many venture capitalists total dicks?
Oh, dude.
I mean,
I don't know.
Has that been your experience?
Yeah, it is. It is. I don't see eye to eye with most of them. I think it's weird. I think that, you know.
Is it a power dynamic?
It's. I don't know what it is. I think there's just a low EQ in the technology ecosystem broadly. Some of these people are just brilliant, and oftentimes on the spectrum as a result of that, in a positive way. Like they're just brilliant at what they do. Yeah. And so I don't think they pick up on social cues very well. It's very different from the way we're taught, especially in the military or even, you know, whether you're a senior enlisted or an officer. Like, got to present yourself, look good. Like, your credibility starts with your handshake and if you look somebody in the eye when you introduce them. It's almost the opposite in the technology ecosystem. You're like, credibility almost goes down because you're not like crazy enough, brilliant, like mad scientist. It's a weird. It took me a while to get, you know, come to grips with that. But I think it is a different dynamic. It is a different culture. It is a different industry. But I do agree that the venture capital ecosystem is very self-important. And it's something I observed when I got into it is they're the first to take credit and the last to embrace any fault.
Yeah.
The last.
Yeah.
And I think there's some dynamics behind that lead to that. And one of the attributes that I learned is if you look at any of the most successful venture capitalists of all time, Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, any of these guys, this is sort of like a heuristic that I use with my team. Can you list any of their zeros, any of their failed investments? Nobody can do it. I challenge anybody to like even remember something that went wrong. Can you list their successes? Oh yeah, Peter Thiel started Palantir. Oh yeah, he's like one of the first investors in SpaceX. You know, Mark Andreessen, he was on the board of Facebook, and like you just like go down the list. And so there's this weird paradigm where it's almost like, and I think it's actually a life paradigm too. Nobody remembers your failures. I think it's helpful to sort of like internalize that when people are going through hard things. Yeah. Is that it's okay to fail, no one's going to remember it. Like at the end of the day, like just try again, get back on the bike and just keep pedaling. And at some point you'll be good if you put in the reps. But to your point about, the venture capitalists, I think there is, and also nobody who's an entrepreneur, A+ athlete entrepreneurs want to work with A+ athlete venture capitalists. Yeah. And so there is a business reason to like try and create the persona that you're, fake it till you make it, that you're like Kobe or Jordan or something like that.
Yeah.
But as with any industry, I think the ones that are truly the best are some of the most humble, some of the nicest people. And the two gentlemen I just mentioned, I spent a lot of time with them. And Mark in particular has been a huge mentor to me. I wouldn't be where I am today, for sure, were it not for him.
Yeah.
And so I really, he's just like the humblest guy,
yeah.
at least with me in my experience. And so I think that, I think it's like anything. A few bad apples will make everybody else look bad. Like a few bad incidents with some team guys will make the Army think that all team guys are fucking gunslinger shitbags or whatever. Yeah. And the reality is sort of the opposite. But in this case, I would categorize the venture ecosystem as being a little bit more shallow than my taste.
Yeah. Man, what a fascinating career and life story you've had. Is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have, or anything else?
I just love being here and the opportunity to talk about these things. I don't get the opportunity, Mike, to do this, and you've done me a favor to just give me the opportunity to reflect and to think back on some of these stories and to think back on these experiences. Because I never think about it, and so it's really been a pleasure for me to sort of like remember some of these things, and even things that like. I don't know. My brain didn't connect until like you brought up like Nico, Nico on my deployment. Like who would have thought? And I haven't thought about that in 15 years.
Yeah.
And so
I will say it's been an honor and a absolute treat to be able to interview you, especially growing up as a swimmer and thinking so highly of and kind of idolizing guys that got to the level that you did swimming my entire childhood. It's if you'd have told me 30 years ago that I'd be sitting here talking to an Olympic medalist swimmer, I'd have fucking slapped you and told you you're full of shit.
Well, bring in somebody with a gold next time, all right? No more of these second place losers.
Yeah, even first loser.
All right. I'm first loser. I'll take it.
It's still, just an honor to interview you. I'd like to present you with a little swag from
this.
Champion Choice Silver and John Johnston help us out with the design and making of that stuff. So you don't come across as a shit-kicking, buckle-wearing guy, but
I will wear it.
Should you find yourself at In Cahoots in San Diego?
My wife has been telling me I got to get a pair of boots and a hat, and there is a bunch of country concerts that play right outside of our office, and so
it actually lifts from the bottom, like the front bottom.
You got to tell us officers how to do this stuff, right? Oh, dude, this is sick.
There's actually some tridents and some blue gemstones in there that are kind of a neat throwback to the community, which I thought would be fitting for you.
I love it, man.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming. To the listener, I hope you enjoyed. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Oh, sir, I appreciate it.
I know we got to get you back to the airport, so listener, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you didn't, you can choke yourself. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.